Chapter 273. Prince Shou looked down on Zhang Chun for a while before he left. Walking out of the Imperial Clan Temple, he coughed a few times and spat out a mouthful of thick phlegm. Bah, scum. Beast. Inhumane. Worse than dogs and pigs. Prince Shou left the Imperial Clan Temple while cursing. Zhang Gu scratched his head in confusion, not understanding why the prince said that. Although this new deputy was unable to see the situation clearly and did not know what was good for him, he could not be called a scum. Not to mention a beast, inhumane, and worse than dogs and pigs. If what Deputy Zhang said was true, then Assistant Minister Cui, the current emperor's son-in-law, was the one who was worthy of these words. Thinking about what Zhang Chun said just now, Zhang Gu could not help but feel a chill in his heart. Killing his wife and exterminating his family time and time again just for his own future. If such a person was described as a beast, even a beast, pig, or dog would feel offended. In the Imperial Clan Temple, Deputy Feng walked into Zhang Chun's office and asked faintly, "Did Lord Zhang understand what the Deputy Minister said just now?" Just now, he was outside and heard Prince Shou's furious words. Assistant Minister Cui was going to be protected in the Imperial Clan Temple. No one could do anything. As the Deputy Minister of the Imperial Clan Temple, Prince Shou had absolute authority in the Imperial Clan Temple. Zhang Chun did not pay any attention to him. He stood there in a daze for a long time before he gradually came back to his senses. He walked to the door and asked a minor official, "Is Prince Shou's surname Shao?" The minor official looked at him strangely and said, "Of course, Prince Shou is the late emperor's younger brother and a member of the imperial family. How could his surname not be Shao?" Zhang Chun touched his chin and smiled. "Wonderful." Not long after, in the secretariat, Cui Ming also learned about the scene that happened in the Imperial Clan Temple from Deputy Feng. King Shou didn't let him down. He immediately intimidated Zhang Chun, which allowed him to heave a sigh of relief. However, it was only temporary. Li Mu had spent a lot of effort to reform the imperial examination and send Zhang Chun to the Zongjing Temple. His target was obviously him. The drama Chen Shimi was most likely created by him. He had spent so much effort to get to this point, so he wouldn't give up so easily. Although he didn't know what Li Mu would do next, he had to take precautions. At this moment, Cui Ming was still puzzled about something. He knew that he had been very secretive about what had happened 20 years ago, and no one had suspected him during the past 20 years. So how did Li Mu and Zhang Chun find out about it? Could it be that there was a fish that escaped the net in the Chu clan? Both of them were from Yangqiu County. Yangqiu County was the starting point of his life. There were many things he had done there that he couldn't let others know about. With the secret in the deepest part of his heart exposed, Cui Ming's mind was no longer in the secretariat. He left the palace again and returned to the prince consort's residence. He had two permanent residences in the palace. One was Princess Yunyang's residence, and the other was the prince consort's residence that the previous emperor had bestowed upon him. After entering the prince consort's residence, Cui Ming directly walked into the deepest courtyard. The entire prince consort's residence was covered by a large formation. This formation was extremely powerful and could withstand the attacks of Dongshuan's cultivators for a moment. The innermost courtyard was where Cui Ming usually cultivated. No one in the residence was allowed to enter. The courtyard was also covered by a formation. The divine capital was the safest place in the Great Zhou. Under the protection of two layers of formations, even a fly couldn't fly into the prince consort's residence. Cui Ming stepped into the courtyard. Standing in the middle of the courtyard, he said, "I need you to make a trip to Yangqiu County in the North County. Check if there are any fish that escaped the net in the Chu clan back then. If there aren't any, search for all the ghosts in Yangqiu County. Back then, I hadn't set foot on the path of cultivation, so I'm not sure if Chu Yun'er has become a Yin spirit." As soon as Cui Ming finished speaking, a human face suddenly appeared on an old tree in the courtyard. The face was old, and the patterns on the tree bark were like wrinkles on the face. The surface of the old tree rose and fell. An old man in brown walked out of the trunk. After nodding slightly at Cui Ming, he walked out of the prince consort's residence without a word. Chui Ming looked up at the sky and clenched his fists. He said in a low voice, "Li Mu, what grudge do I have with you? How can you go against me like this?" The divine capital Yamen. Li Mu learned about what had just happened in the Zongjing Temple from Zhang Chun. Sure enough, even if they broke into the Zongjing Temple, it was still impossible to deal with Chui Ming. Even if it was a simple summons, they would encounter heavy resistance. Chui Ming's status in the old party was extremely high. He was the prince consort and the assistant minister of the secretariat. He controlled the state's affairs. Other than Zhang Chun and the new vice minister Liu Biao, the rest of the people in the Zongjing Temple were from the old party. Especially the minister of the Zongjing Temple, who was the king of the Great Zhou. He had absolute control over the Zongjing Temple. Present, they still had to make a big deal out of this. The script of Chun Shimi was given to the owner of the Miaoying Lane by Li Mu. She asked her performers to turn it into an opera as quickly as possible. Under her deliberate promotion, she sold the script to other opera houses at a low price. Only then could such a phenomenal play be produced. Once Chui Ming's matter was exposed, with the popularity of Chun Shimi, it would probably set off a frenzy of public opinion in the divine capital. The imperial court could care less about anything except public opinion. This was closely related to the faith of the people. It was related to the continuation of the Great Zhou. The next day, the tri-daily morning court session was held as scheduled. In the last few court sessions, the officials were discussing the imperial examination. They were contributing to the Secretariat's policy. Just yesterday, the Secretariat had completed the formulation of the imperial examination policy. The next thing to do was for the various departments to implement it as soon as possible. The talents recommended by the 36 prefectures had already left for the divine capital. They had to complete all matters related to the imperial examination within 2 months. The morning court session today ended after more than 4 hours of discussion. Just when everyone thought they could leave, a voice came from the back of the 100 officials. "Your Majesty, I have a memorial." Someone recognized that person. It was the commissioner of the divine capital, Zhang Chun. They didn't know who the previous commissioners of the divine capital were, but the current commissioner of the divine capital had caused a ruckus in the imperial court several times. It was hard not to have a deep impression of him. Some of the officials in the 3 provinces and the Ministry of Personnel knew that just yesterday, the commissioner of the divine capital, Zhang Chun, was also the deputy of the Imperial Ancestral Temple. Ever since the imperial examination was introduced and the Imperial Ancestral Temple supervised the imperial examination, the deputy of the Imperial Ancestral Temple had become the most popular position in the imperial court. Chui Ming's position was only behind the commissioner of ministers, the secretariat's head of department, and the ministers of the 6 departments. When he saw Zhang Chun stand out, he suddenly had a bad premonition. Zhang Chun hugged his ceremonial tablet and bowed. "I want to impeach the assistant minister of the secretariat, Chui Ming, and the deputy of the Imperial Ancestral Temple." When Chui Ming heard this, his mind exploded. In the crowd, Deputy Feng was also stunned. He thought that after Prince Shou's discipline, Zhang Chun would be more obedient. He did not expect him to be so ruthless. He bypassed the Imperial Ancestral Temple and brought this matter to the imperial court. Moreover, not only did he impeach Assistant Minister Chui, but he also impeached Prince Shou. This was crazy. There were even more people in Crepe Myrtle Hall who were confused. Zhang Chun was taught by Li Mu. In the imperial court, he dared to oppose the former emperor's old system and dared to talk back to the academy's instructors. Now, why did he go against Prince Consort Chui and Prince Shou? The empress did not speak. Shangguanli looked at Zhang Chun and asked, "Lord Zhang, why are you impeaching them?" Zhang Chun said, "I impeached Chui Ming because Chui Ming was involved in a murder case that involved dozens of lives. I impeached the deputy of the Imperial Ancestral Temple because the deputy of the Imperial Ancestral Temple not only stopped me from summoning Chui Ming for interrogation, but also said that no matter what crime Chui Ming committed, the Imperial Ancestral Temple would protect him. May I ask, where is justice and justice for officials to protect each other?" In this short period of time, Some officials already knew that Zhang Chun had just been promoted to the position of deputy of the Imperial Ancestral Temple. When the officials of the Imperial Court first took office, which one of them was not careful? When they spoke to their colleagues and superiors, they had to put on a smiling face. This Zhang Chun, on his first day in office, impeached his superior's superior in the Imperial Court. He did not even recognize his own family. At the front, Chui Ming's expression was calm. However, the fists in his sleeves were clenched tightly. Shangguan Li turned to look at the curtain and asked, "What murder case was Assistant Minister Chui involved in?" Zhang Chun said in a low voice, "More than 20 years ago, when Chui Ming was in Yangqiu County, he was engaged to a woman. Not long after, he cruelly killed the woman in order to attach himself to a prominent family in Yangqiu County. After that, he was recommended by the prominent family to enter the academy. However, he later became acquainted with the daughter of the Zhejiang County chief." As Zhang Chun spoke, there was an uproar in the Imperial Court. What kind of status did Chui Ming have? He was the son-in-law of Princess Yunyang and the assistant minister of the Secretariat. How could he do such a cruel thing? He was worse than Chun Shimi in the opera. Twice in a row, for the sake of his own future, he killed his fiancée and even killed dozens of people in his wife's family. How could this be done by one person? Some of the old officials in the Imperial Court had heard of Chui Ming's past. The matter of the Zhejiang County chief colluding with the demon sect back then had caused an uproar in the Imperial Court. Even now, there were still people who remembered that Chui Ming had placed righteousness before family and was placed in an important position by the late emperor. Wait, this matter sounded a little familiar. Exposing his wife's family in exchange for his promotion. Wasn't this the same thing that Zhang Chun said happened to the prominent family in Yangqiu County? One fiancé, one wife, two wives' families, hundreds of people, were all killed because they colluded with the heretical cultivation of the demon sect. Assistant Minister Chui could be said to have met the wrong person. However, he himself was not affected. Instead, his official position was getting higher and his status was getting more and more prominent. Now, he was the assistant minister of the Secretariat and the son-in-law of a country. It was too much of a coincidence to say that this was a coincidence. The Imperial Court was in chaos. A breath swept across the Imperial Court through the curtain, and the Imperial Court instantly quieted down. Shangguan Li looked at Chui Ming and asked, "Assistant Minister Chui, what do you have to say?" Chui Ming raised his head and said righteously, "The Chu family colluded with the heretical cultivation and deserved to die. Even if this official was given another chance, this official would still choose to get rid of the traitors for the country." Assistant Minister Zhang only heard a few words of slander from a despicable person and slandered this official in the Imperial Court. What are your intentions? Chapter 274. None of the officials in the court believed that Zhang Chun had any ulterior motives for impeaching Chui Ming. Although Zhang Chun and Li Mu both disowned each other and disliked each other, they had one thing in common, and that was that they had no selfish motives. The old party and the new party fought each other because the competition in the Imperial Court was related to their actual interests. No matter how fierce Li Mu and Zhang Chun were, there was no real benefit for them. He couldn't possibly frame Assistant Minister Chui just because he was jealous that he was more handsome than him. Zhang Chun snorted coldly. "Whether I'm framing you or not, we'll know once we check Chui Ming's soul." At the front of the court, someone stepped forward and said coldly, "Impudent! Lord Chui is the emperor's son-in-law, a fourth-rank official. How can he be humiliated just because of your one-sided words?" The art of soul manipulation was a common method used by the government to investigate cases. For a suspect in a case, as long as they used the art of soul manipulation on him, they could easily break through his psychological defenses and make him spill all the secrets in his heart. Of course, the prerequisite was that the target was a mortal who had yet to condense his soul. After a cultivator condensed his soul force would be strong and it would be difficult to manipulate his soul. After 3 souls fused and condensed into a nascent spirit, it would be even more difficult to manipulate the soul. The person who manipulated the soul had to be several realms higher in cultivation than the person being manipulated. Under the art of soul manipulation, there were no secrets. However, all cultivators had secrets and opportunities. Some secrets couldn't be easily exposed in front of others. For cultivators, soul manipulation was a great taboo. There was nothing more humiliating than soul manipulation and soul searching. As a fourth-rank official and the emperor's son-in-law, as long as he didn't commit a major crime like rebellion, the court, even the emperor, couldn't perform soul manipulation and soul searching on him. Once this precedent was set, all the officials in the court would be in danger. No one knew when their thoughts and past would be exposed naked in front of others because of something. This was a bottom line that couldn't be easily crossed at the national level. Furthermore, it wasn't impossible for experts to tamper with their memories and souls. Relying too much on them would sometimes backfire. After the Minister of Personnel scolded Zhang Chun, Cui Ming stood up and said, "I've always been open and above board. I'm willing to accept the soul search, Your Majesty. Please clear my name." As soon as he said this, some of the officials in the hall revealed strange expressions. Cui Ming's words were either honest and upright and had a clear conscience, or he was fearless and confident in dealing with the emperor's soul-searching. Regardless of the situation, even if the emperor really did use soul-searching, he probably wouldn't be able to find anything. And His Majesty would never do that. Because of a baseless and groundless case, the emperor's son-in-law, a rank 4 official, had already crossed the bottom line of the royal court, and it would bring even greater chaos to the royal court. Cui Ming pointed to the sky and said, "I swear on the heavens and earth that if I lie, I will be struck by lightning and die a horrible death." In order to prove his innocence, he didn't hesitate to swear a Tao oath. This changed the opinion of some of the officials in the royal court. Cultivators respected the heavens and earth, and they wouldn't swear a Tao oath easily. A Tao oath wasn't just an oath, it also had a certain mysterious power, and could be considered as a kind of supernatural power. However, a Tao oath did not represent everything. Although many people would shout, "If I violate a Tao oath, I will be punished by the heavens," when making an oath, if every oath could be fulfilled, why would there be a need for the imperial court and the government to make an oath to the heavens when encountering unpredictable situations? Swearing a Tao oath couldn't completely prove Cui Ming's innocence. After a while, the Empress's voice finally came from behind the curtain. "This case will be jointly investigated by the Ministry of Justice and the Imperial Clan Temple. Assistant Minister Cui will have to cooperate with the investigation." Cui Ming said, "Yes, Your Majesty." Shangguanli stepped forward and said, "The court is dismissed." From the beginning to the end, the Empress only mentioned Cui Ming and didn't mention Prince Shou. The officials also tacitly chose to forget about it. Prince Shou was a former member of the royal family, and his identity was sensitive. As long as he didn't commit any serious crimes, it wouldn't be easy to deal with him. Cui Ming's identity was noble, and even if he was involved in a case, his freedom wasn't restricted. When he left the Ziwei Hall, he glanced at Zhang Chun and then went to the secretariat. Zhang Chun walked out of the hall, and Minister Feng chased after him. He said angrily, You, Zhang Chun, you really have the guts of a leopard. You dare to talk nonsense in the royal court without any evidence? Do you think the prince consort can make a false accusation? If the Ministry of Justice finds out that Lord Cui is innocent, your official position will be gone." Zhang Chun glanced at him indifferently and said, "You can say that after his innocence is proven." Minister Feng left angrily, and Li Mu walked up from behind. Zhang Chun looked at him and asked, "Are you sure you have a witness?" Li Mu touched the ring on his finger and said, "Don't worry. Even if the Ministry of Justice and the Zongjing Temple weren't willing to punish Cui Ming, they had to follow the Empress's orders. The court was set up in the Ministry of Justice. To prevent the Zongjing Temple and the Ministry of Justice from being biased, the Empress added that the trial would be held in public. The meaning of public trial was that all the procedures would be supervised by other officials or the people. The trial process would be transparent, and any favoritism would be avoided. The person who sued Cui Ming was Zhang Chun, so he naturally couldn't be absent. The Zongjing Temple was attended by Prince Shou, and the Ministry of Justice was presided over by Assistant Minister Zhou Zhong. Other than that, there were a few officials from the Censorate and the Dali Temple. Li Mu was one of the officials from the Censorate. The people of Shindu also heard about it, and they all gathered outside the Ministry of Justice. Chui Ming was a relative of the emperor, and also an important official in the royal court. The country's scandal shouldn't be aired in public. Under normal circumstances, the Zongjing Temple's trial would be held in secret. This time, the Ministry of Justice didn't let the people in and closed the door. Since the people couldn't see what was going on inside, the discussions became even more heated. Who are they interrogating? Why are they making such a big fuss? I saw many officials entering earlier, and they didn't even let us in. I know. My relative works in the Zongjing Temple. Yesterday, Lord Zhang and the head of the Zongjing Temple quarreled. I heard that Prince Consort Chui committed a huge crime, and Lord Zhang wanted to investigate it, but the head of the Zongjing Temple refused to let him. What crime did Prince Consort Chui commit? I heard that he killed his wife and her family for his future. Tisk, that's so vicious. Isn't he more detestable than Chen Shimi? I don't know if it's true or not, but the people interrogating Prince Consort Chui are the Assistant Minister of Justice and the head of the Zongjing Temple. They are in cahoots, so what can they get out of it? In the court of the Ministry of Justice, Chui Ming's case was presided over by Assistant Minister Zhou Zhong of the Ministry of Justice and Prince Shou of the Zongjing Temple as his assistant. In terms of status, relatives of the royal family and officials of the fourth rank and above were under the jurisdiction of the Zongjing Temple. However, after Zhang Chun impeached Prince Shou in the imperial court, although the emperor did not punish him, it was still inappropriate for him to be the presiding judge. Although Chui Ming was the defendant, he could sit in the court because of his noble status. Zhang Chun, on the other hand, had to stand at the side. Behind the table, Assistant Minister Zhou Zhong of the Ministry of Justice patted the gavel and looked at Zhang Chun. He asked, "Deputy Zhang, you said that Assistant Minister Chui killed the Chu family in Yangqiu County 20 years ago and framed the Chu family for colluding with the heretical cultivation. Do you have any evidence? If you don't, the crime of wantonly framing a relative of the royal family and an important official in the imperial court is not light." Chui Ming sat on the chair with a calm expression. He looked calm, but his attention was all on Zhang Chun. When Zhang Chun found out about this, he did not panic. What he feared the most was how Zhang Chun found out about the matter between Su He and Chu Yun, more than 20 years ago. If Zhang Chun accidentally found out about the matter between the Chu family and Su He when he was the county magistrate of Yangqiu County, and used this to slander him and ruin his reputation in Fairy's capital, he would make Zhang Chun pay an even more painful price after this matter. He was worried that Zhang Chun really had some information that could be used against him. Zhang Chun raised his head and looked at Zhou Zhong. He smiled and said, "I've been the county magistrate for more than 10 years. Without evidence, how would I dare to slander the current emperor's son-in-law?" Chui Ming's eyelids twitched. He looked at Zhang Chun. Zhou Zhong said, "Since Deputy Zhang has evidence, take it out." Zhang Chun took out a piece of spiritual jade. He held it in his hand and crushed it. A cloud of mist emerged from the spiritual jade and finally turned into the figure of a woman. It was Madame Chu, who had been stripped of her sword spirit identity by Li Mu. The moment Madame Chu appeared, she saw the figure sitting on the chair. For more than 20 years, she had been thinking about this figure all the time. She wanted to drink his blood, eat his flesh, and burn his soul with ghost fire day and night. The intense hatred made her lose her mind in an instant. Black chi surged around her body, and her eyes turned blood red. She pounced on Chui Ming and said sternly, "Chui Ming, give me your life." The moment Madame Chu appeared, Chui Ming could no longer maintain his composure. He stood up abruptly. The next moment, Madame Chu's ghostly figure pounced on him. Chui Ming was not shocked. Instead, he was delighted. He immediately struck out with his palm and attacked with all his might. He did not expect Chu Yun'er's spirit to be with Zhang Chun. He also did not expect her to attack him with all her might as soon as she appeared. This gave him a reason to fight back. She was only at the fourth realm. This palm strike was enough to destroy her soul. She was truly dead and could not bear witness. He used all of his cultivation in this palm strike. He did not hold back at all. "How dare you?" At this moment, he heard a sudden roar. Zhang Chun stood in front of Madame Chu and took the full brunt of the palm strike. His body flew backward, and blood spurted from his mouth. After he landed, he pointed at Cui Ming angrily and said loudly, "This is the spirit of the Chu family woman. You all saw it, right?" Cui Ming wanted to destroy the witness. He has a guilty conscience. Cui Ming's expression darkened. He had raised his hand again, but he put it down again. At this moment, Madame Chu had regained some of her consciousness. However, her aura was still extremely unstable. As she stood in the Ministry of Justice's courtroom, her resentment continued to rise. Zhou Zhong's eyes flashed. He stood up abruptly, and a powerful aura erupted from his body. He suppressed Madame Chu and said sternly, "How dare you, ghost? How dare you try to assassinate the prince consort?" Li Mu knew that things were not going well. Madame Chu's hatred for Cui Ming was too strong. Now that it had erupted, her anger affected her mind. She almost went mad, and this gave Zhou Zhong an excuse to suppress her. Under the pressure of Zhou Zhong's powerful aura, Madame Chu's spirit became even more unstable. She was on the verge of collapse. However, the resentment on her grew stronger, and her aura became more and more terrifying. Her hatred for Cui Ming and his ruthlessness toward the Ministry of Justice's officials all turned into resentment in her heart. At this moment, the resentment in the Ministry of Justice was so strong that people all over the fairy's capital could sense it. Boom! When the resentment reached its peak, countless citizens on the streets of the fairy's capital looked up at the sky. At this moment, the wind and clouds in the fairy's capital swept away. Chapter 275. A strange phenomenon appeared in the sky above Shin. The clouds rolled back, revealing a giant funnel. The end of the funnel pointed at the Ministry of Justice. Dense spiritual energy gushed out of the funnel and landed on Madame Chu's body. Madame Chu's resentment disappeared, but her aura rose rapidly. From early stage 4th realm to mid-stage 4th realm to peak stage 4th realm, it was like a hot knife through butter. Her body emitted a powerful 5th realm aura. Zhou Zhong's pressure on him completely disappeared at this moment. Prince Shou turned to look at Zhou Zhong, then looked away. Zhang Chun got up from the ground and looked at Zhou Zhong discreetly. He coughed heavily and spat out another mouthful of blood. After reaching 5th realm, Madame Chu calmed down. She stood quietly in the court and bowed to everyone in the court. "I've been wronged for 20 years. When I see this evil man again, I can't control my emotions. Please don't blame me. I'm fine now. You can continue with the trial." The people at the side looked at each other, speechless. Was there a need to continue with the trial? Humans could be bullied, but not the heavens. This woman's resentment was so strong that it could even trigger the heavens and earth to fill her body with dense spiritual energy, allowing her to reach 5th realm. If Cui Ming didn't do anything cruel to her, why would she hate Cui Ming so much? The severity of this matter was beyond the case itself. The capital of Great Zhou, under the emperor's feet, the heavens actually created a 5th realm evil spirit. How ironic was this? Behind the table, Zhou Zhong looked at Prince Shou and asked, "Your Highness, what should we do now?" Prince Shou hid his hands in his sleeves and shook his head. "You're the presiding judge. Don't ask me. I don't know these things." Zhou Zhong looked at Madame Chu and said, "What grievances do you have? You can tell us in detail." Madame Chu raised her head and said slowly, "More than 20 years ago, when Cui Ming was still in Yangqiu County." Madame Chu spoke slowly. In the court of the Ministry of Justice, the officials at the side, like Li Mu, were shocked. After experiencing the vision of heaven and earth, they no longer doubted the woman's words. According to her, Princess Yunyang's son-in-law, Cui Ming, the assistant minister of the secretariat, was a complete beast. For the sake of his future, not only did he kill his fiancée, he even framed his fiancée's entire clan for colluding with the heretical cultivation and killed her to silence her. Such actions were extremely beastly, and he was simply even more despicable than Chen Shimi. The heavens must be blind to allow him to advance smoothly and sit at such a high position. After their impression of Cui Ming changed, Some people even began to suspect that the collusion of the Zhejiang prefectural governor with the demon sect was also a trick he had used in order to step on the corpses of the Zhejiang prefectural governor's family and advance in the officialdom. After Madame Chu finished speaking, the court of the Ministry of Justice fell into a long silence. Zhou Zhong finally looked at Cui Ming and asked, "Assistant Minister Cui, do you have anything else to say?" Cui Ming did not say a word. At this point, no matter what he said, it would be useless. Zhou Zhong said calmly, "First detain Cui Ming and wait for Her Majesty to deal with him." At this moment, Cui Ming was calm and allowed the bailiffs of the Ministry of Justice to put on the shackles that restricted his mana. After he was taken away, a figure descended from the sky. Mr. Mei walked in and said, "Her Majesty has decreed that Cui Ming is to be taken to the prison of the Imperial Clan Temple." Very few things that happened in the Luoyang could be hidden from the Empress of the Seventh Realm. The Empress had probably already predicted this when the vision appeared in the sky. Madame Chu knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Li Mu and Zhang Chun. She said, "Thank you, sir." "Thank you." Zhang Chun's face was pale. He patted his chest and said, "No need to thank me. This is what I should do." Then he looked at Li Mu and extended his hand. He said, "Do you have any more healing pills? Quickly give me some." That damn Cui Ming. That palm strike contained at least 30% of his power. I almost died. Li Mu took out a bottle of pills and threw it to him. He said, "Don't be so stubborn next time. Even if you want to protect a witness, you don't have to take that palm strike." Zhang Chun took the pills and said, "The situation was urgent. I didn't have time to think so much. This time, I need to rest for a while." Cui Ming was the emperor's son-in-law. Even if he broke the law, he would not be paraded through the streets in front of the people of the Luoyang. The people of the Ministry of Justice secretly sent him to the Imperial Clan Temple in the palace. The doors of the Ministry of Justice opened. The people scrambled to look inside, but they saw nothing. Li Mu walked out of the Ministry of Justice. Someone impatiently asked, "Constable Li, what's going on inside? Why did the sky change just now?" Li Mu smiled and said, "That villain has confessed and is in jail." The people were in an uproar. "What? That thing is true? I thought that this kind of thing only happened in dramas. This Cui Ming is even more evil than Chen Shimi. This kind of person should be cut into pieces." Li Mu saw the anger of the people and felt that it was a pity. If only Su He was in the Luoyang right now and could see this scene with her own eyes. She didn't come to the Luoyang to find Li Mu. She was probably still in the array. After this, he would immediately return to the northern region and tell her about Cui Ming's fate. Then, he would go to Baiyun Mountain to reunite with Lu Hanyan. "Constable Li, good job. Thanks to you, this villain can be punished. You really are the justice of the Luoyang. Please accept our respect." Sensing the strong psyche power from the people, Li Mu was stunned. Usually, he would redress the grievances for the people. Perhaps the people were used to it. However, he had been plotting behind the scenes this whole time. The person who contributed in front of the stage, spoke out in the Golden Palace, and was almost killed by Cui Ming in the court of the Ministry of Justice was someone else. Piffed. Zhang Chun stood beside Li Mu. He clutched his chest and couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood. When he returned home gloomily, Madame Zhang saw his blood-stained official robe and ran up to him in shock. She asked in a panic, "What happened? Where did the blood come from? Didn't you go to the imperial court? How did this happen?" "It's just a small injury. It's not a big deal." Zhang Chun popped a pill into his mouth and said confidently, "That Cui Ming is indeed a beast." Just now, in the court of the Ministry of Justice, seeing that the matter was exposed, he actually wanted to destroy the witness. "Fortunately, I stepped forward bravely and saved the witness." Madame Zhang took off his blood-stained robe and scolded, "You're the only one who knows how to show off. If something happened to you, what would Yi and I do?" Zhang Chun snorted and said, "I'm not showing off. This is what I should do as an official and a man. It's useless for a man to be handsome. He must be righteous. If Cui Ming wasn't handsome, he wouldn't have been able to deceive those women. Some women are just short-sighted. They only care about a man's appearance and don't understand the inner workings of a man. Madame Zhang's heart ached. Yes, yes, yes. You're right. Sit down first. Do you feel any discomfort? Where are you hurt? Does it hurt? Ministry of Justice. After Cui Ming was taken away, the Shao royal family and some officials from the old party came to inquire about the situation. The Minister of Personnel frowned and said, "How did this happen?" Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "I also didn't think that the woman's resentment would be so deep. I originally wanted to force her into becoming a demon and kill her while I was at it, but I didn't think that it would stimulate her resentment and allow her to reach the fifth realm. It's all my fault." The Minister of Personnel said, "You can't blame Lord Zhou. No one expected this to happen. I didn't expect Assistant Minister Cui to have such a terrible past. He's in big trouble this time," Prince Shou said. "Since he's in the Imperial Clan Temple, I'll think of a way to get him out." "You can't." The Minister of Personnel said hurriedly, "Heaven and earth have shown signs of abnormalities. Your Highness, you can't interfere in this matter. I think Princess Yunyang will think of a way. We can only watch." Prince Shou put his hands back into his sleeves and said, "Then there's no other way. I've done everything I can." After leaving the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu did not go home, nor did he return to the divine capital Yamen. Instead, he brought Madame Chu and Mr. Mei to the palace. The situation in the court of the Ministry of Justice was very dangerous just now. Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief and said, "It was too dangerous just now. If you were completely possessed in the court, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice could kill you directly." Madame Chu was silent for a moment before she said, "Young master told me that I must be rational in court. However, when Lord Zhang let me out, I suddenly lost control of my emotions. Now that I think about it, someone must have controlled me." Li Mu paused and asked, "Who?" Madame Chu thought for a moment and said, "It was that assistant minister." Li Mu was shocked. "The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong?" Madame Chu nodded. Li Mu murmured, "Why did he control you? Did he want you to lose your rationality and be killed by Cui Ming? Dead people tell no tales?" Madame Chu shook her head and said, "After that, he used his aura to suppress me. With his strength, he could have easily destroyed my soul, but he didn't do so. With Madame Chu's cultivation at the fourth realm, to destroy her soul with aura alone would require extremely strong strength." Li Mu was shocked. "Zhou Zhong is that strong?" Madame Chu said, "I can feel that he's very strong, very strong." Chapter 276. Zhou Zhong was the mainstay of the old party. Although his status was not as high as Cui Ming's, his status in the old party might not be comparable to Cui Ming's. Among the three provinces, the Secretariat was directly involved in the decision-making of national affairs. However, how to interpret national policies and implement them was the responsibility of the 6 ministries of the minister. Among them, the 6 ministries had a lot of freedom to act. There were many cases where they agreed in public but disobeyed in private. The Secretariat was only responsible for making plans. It was beyond their control whether or not the 6 ministries of the minister implemented the policies and how to implement them. Li Mu could not understand why Zhou Zhong would help Mrs. Chu. Even though he had been in Luoyang for a long time, there were many twists and turns in the imperial court. He still could not see through them. Maybe Zhou Zhong and Cui Ming had old grudges and wanted to use Mrs. Chu to get rid of him. Or maybe he was just like Zhang Chun, a middle-aged man who was jealous of his excellent peers. Mr. Mei led Li Mu and Mrs. Chu into Shangyang Palace. Mrs. Chu was already in the 5th plane and was one of the strongest in the world. However, when facing the back of the figure in the palace, she still lowered her head respectfully. Mr. Mei walked forward and said, "Your Majesty, Li Mu and the woman from the Chu family are here." Mrs. Chu knelt on the ground and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, I am your humble servant." The Empress turned around and said softly, "Rise." Mrs. Chu was still kneeling on the ground and said, 20 years ago, Cui Ming killed me and 36 people of the Chu family. I beg your Majesty to uphold justice for me." The Empress raised her hand slightly and Mrs. Chu could no longer kneel. She looked at Mrs. Chu and said, "Although the tragedy of the Chu family was caused by Cui Ming, the imperial court was also at fault. I will do things according to the law. Apart from that, you can ask for any compensation you want." Mrs. Chu shook her head and said, "The Chu family did not collude with the heretical cultivation. They were framed by a villain. I want the imperial court to clear the Chu family's name and ask Cui Ming to pay the price for what he did." The Empress nodded and said, "This is what the imperial court should do." She looked at Madame Chu and said, "You've just broken through, and your foundation isn't stable yet. Mei Wei, take some soul jade from the treasury and help her stabilize her cultivation." Mr. Mei nodded and said to Mrs. Chu, "Please come with me." The current Madame Chu no longer needed Li Mu's protection. The internal guards would protect her. After they left, Li Mu did not plan to stay any longer. After the embarrassment of having his wet dream interrupted by the Empress last time, he still felt a little unnatural in front of the Empress. He was clearly wearing a few layers of clothes, and his body was tightly wrapped, but he always felt like he was naked, without a trace of clothing. Li Mu bowed and cupped his fists. "If there is nothing else, I will take my leave." The Empress asked, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Cui Ming's case was completely different from Zhang Chun making a fuss in the imperial court by the Empress. Li Mu paused and said honestly, "Cui Ming's case is better handled by the imperial clan temple than by your majesty. If your majesty directly intervenes, it will send some wrong signals to the imperial court and affect the balance between the new party and the old party. Moreover, your majesty will directly face the pressure of the West Palace and the Shao royal family." The Empress said, "You're really considerate of me." Li Mu said seriously, "Taking a salary from you and sharing your burdens is what I should do." The Empress was silent for a moment and sighed softly. She said, "More than 30 people disappeared from this world because of one false statement. Isn't the imperial court giving the local government too much power?" Li Mu had considered this problem before. When dealing with Zhao Yong and Ren Yuan, as long as the Zhang County magistrates submitted the application and the county government checked the file and found no suspicious points, they could sign the document of execution. In reality, the person in charge of the life and death of the people was the county magistrate. There was a saying among the people, "Break a family's county magistrate, destroy a family's county magistrate." A county magistrate could destroy the families of the ordinary people in his jurisdiction. A county magistrate could destroy a family and confiscate a family's property with just a word. This would greatly increase the efficiency of closing cases, but it could easily lead to a large number of unjust, false, and wrong cases. Human lives were greater than heaven. This system of Great Zhou was indeed too hasty. He looked at the Empress and said, "Human lives are at stake. Why don't we take back the authority of local officials? Sentences above execution need to be submitted to the Ministry of Justice for approval and finally handed to your Majesty for approval and then sent to each county." The Empress thought for a moment and nodded. "Your suggestion is very good. When you leave the palace, go to the Hall of Secretaries to pass on my decree. In the future, the sentences of serious homicide cases in each county of Great Zhou will be approved by the county government and then handed to the Ministry of Justice." Li Mu cupped his hands and said, "Your subject obeys." Unknowingly, the distance between him and the Empress was one step closer. Things like passing on decrees should have been done by Shangguan Li. In the eyes of the officials, she was the spokesperson of the Empress. If this continued, the day when he replaced Shangguan Li was not far away. Standing in front of the Empress, he felt as if he was naked. Li Mu opened his mouth again and said, "Your subject will go to the Hall of Secretaries to pass on the decree." The Empress nodded and said, "Go!" He took 2 steps and the Empress's voice came from behind him. "Do you need me to reward you with a few maids?" Sure enough, the Empress still remembered that matter. Li Mu said awkwardly, "There's no need. Thank you, Your Majesty. Your subject will take his leave." Although the Empress had good intentions, even if she rewarded Li Mu with a few beautiful maids, Li Mu would not dare to accept. Not using them was one thing. If Lu Hanyan returned home and saw a group of beautiful women in his house, he would be jealous on the first day. Up until now, Li Mu had always kept the promise he made to her before he left. After leaving Shangyang Palace, Li Mu went straight to the Hall of Secretaries. The Hall of Secretaries was a confidential place and outsiders were not allowed to enter. However, the constable at the entrance did not stop him. Some time ago, he came to the Hall of Secretaries more frequently than he came home. He could almost be considered half a person of the Hall of Secretaries. Li Mu walked through the entrance of the Hall of Secretaries and asked the constable, "Is Lord Lu here?" The constable swallowed his saliva and said, "Yes, the lords are all here. I will go and call." In the Hall of Secretaries, anyone who mentioned Li Mu's name would tremble. The assistant minister of the Hall of Secretaries, the emperor's son-in-law, was a high official with a prominent status. However, he was sent to the prison of the Zongjing Temple in less than a month. The assistant minister was sent to the Zongjing Temple by him. This was not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that he first placed the Zongjing Temple on the same level as the other officials from the imperial examinations. Then, he used sufficient reasons to persuade the lords to expand the number of officials in the Zongjing Temple. Then, he took the opportunity to send his own subordinates to the Zongjing Temple. Along the way, he fought steadily and surely, advancing step by step in order to pull the assistant minister of the Hall of Secretaries down from his high horse. Before this, he did not express any intention to target Assistant Minister Cui. Even when he met him, he would take the initiative to smile and greet him. What kind of scheming was this? If he wanted to scheme against someone, it was likely that the other party would not know why they died until they were at death's door. Soon, Louis hurriedly ran out from a yamen and asked, "Lord Li, is there a problem?" Li Mu said, "His Majesty asked me to pass on a verbal order. In the future, when serious murder cases occur in the various counties, after being investigated by the county yamen, they will be sent to the Ministry of Justice for approval. In the end, His Majesty will give the final approval. You all should discuss and quickly write out a written rule for the Ministry of Justice to implement." Louis nodded and said, "I understand. This official will discuss this with a few colleagues." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Then I will be leaving. See you later." Louis also raised his head and said, "See you later, Lord Li." When he returned to the yamen, he let out a long sigh of relief. When he thought about how Li Mu had discussed the imperial examinations with them for the past half a month, he felt a chill run down his spine. It seemed that he was planning for the Hall of Secretaries, but in reality he was thinking about how to kill the assistant minister of the Hall of Secretaries. Li Mu had always given people the impression that he was very upright. He was not afraid of power and did not fear the heavens and earth. In the imperial court he spoke bluntly, and in the imperial court he was courageous. The 6 officials of the Hall of Secretaries, including Louis, all believed that Li Mu was a straightforward person. He did things in a straightforward manner and did not know how to compromise. If he were to be compared to an animal, the most suitable animal would be a dog. He was the Empress's loyal dog, loyally protecting his master. Anyone who dared to provoke the Empress would have a piece of their flesh bitten off by him. Although a loyal dog was fierce, he was not to be feared. As long as one avoided him, there was no need to worry about being bitten. However, no one would have thought that Li Mu was not a dog, but a fox, an extremely cunning fox. On the surface, he looked harmless, showing a kind smile to you every day. However, at the critical moment, he would reveal his sharp fangs and bite off your neck. A vicious dog was not frightening. What was frightening was a cunning fox. Chapter 277. When he walked out of the secretariat, Li Mu sighed softly. Half a month ago, Louis was so warm to him, calling him brotherly. Just now, in the secretariat, Louis's attitude towards him had changed dramatically. Warmth became politeness, politeness with alienation, and within the alienation with vigilance. Obviously, after the incident with Cui Ming, the straight man image he had painstakingly built had collapsed. Before today, the courtiers at most thought that he was a bootlicker of the Empress. After today, they would guard against him as a cunning fox. Although a bootlicker would bite, A dog's brain was not as scheming. Foxes were different. In the eyes of most people, foxes were cunning, sinister, and treacherous. This was actually a stereotype of this race. There were foxes who were stupid. Xiao Bai almost had the words, stupid, white, and sweet, written on his face. Once everyone's impression of him changed, no matter what he did, they would probably guess whether he had a deeper motive. When he walked out of the secretariat and passed by the palace gate, a sedan chair came from outside the palace. Out of the way, out of the way! The few sedan bearers who were carrying the palanquin berated Li Mu from afar to move aside. Li Mu looked left and right. The palace gate could allow at least 4 palanquins to pass through at the same time. He wondered who was inside the palanquin. When he walked out of the palace gate, he happened to hear a few guards talking. It's Princess Yunyang's sedan chair. The prince consort is in prison. The princess can't sit still anymore. The prince consort's character is so bad. The princess should just kick him away and let him fend for himself. Hearing Princess Yunyang's name, Li Mu looked back. The sedan chair had disappeared at the end of his line of sight. Judging from the direction, it should be going to the West Palace. The West Palace was occupied by the previous emperor's concubines. Although the great Zhou emperor had changed his surname, after the empress ascended the throne, she did not purge the Shao royal family. She also did not make things difficult for the concubines left behind by the previous emperor. They were still allowed to live in the West Palace and were treated according to the etiquette of imperial concubines. When Mr. Mei mentioned Cui Ming and Princess Yunyang, his face was full of disdain. He looked down on the couple and thought that they were probably jackals of the same tribe. Regardless of whether it was Princess Yunyang, the Shao royal family, or the officials of the old party, they would certainly not watch Cui Ming fall from power. Princess Yunyang had entered the palace in such a hurry. She must have gone to the West Palace to plead for leniency. Li Mu left the palace and walked on the streets. The people on the streets were all talking about Cui Ming. Madame Chu had caused a huge commotion in the Hall of Punishments earlier, and those who saw the phenomenon couldn't help but ask about the reason behind it. You can't judge a book by its cover. Who would have thought that Prince Consort Cui, who looks like a dog, is actually a beast? I already knew that he wasn't a good person. Look at his face. His cheekbones are sunken, and his eyebrows are high. One look and I can tell that he's a hypocritical and ruthless person. All the ladies in Fairy's capital are captivated by him. There must be something strange about him. The imperial court should just kill a beast like him. Don't let him harm the women of Fairy's capital anymore. He's always loitering on the streets. It's so annoying. None of these good-looking people are good. That's not all of them. Constable Li is also good-looking. Cui Ming isn't even fit to carry his shoes. Constable Li has sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, and a round nose. One look and you can tell that he's an upright person. It's just that he's fated to be in love. What's so strange about that? If I were a woman, I'd want to marry him too. On the streets of Fairy's capital, butchers, waiters, and peddlers gathered in 2s and 3s. They all expressed their disdain for a beast like Cui Ming. They wanted nothing more than to tear him into pieces and send his soul to the 18th level of hell. In a rouge shop by the street, a few women who were choosing rouge were also discussing this matter. You can't judge a book by its cover. I didn't expect Prince Consort Cui to be this kind of person. To think that I like him so much. I even dreamt of him the day before yesterday. I didn't expect him to be such a beast. 2 young women sighed while choosing rouge. Their last companion snorted and said, "No matter what Prince Consort Cui does, I'll still like him. He'll always be the prince consort in my heart." A woman frowned and said, "How can you be like this? He killed his wife and dozens of her family for his future. How can you like someone like this? Do you still have any sense of right and wrong?" The woman pouted and said, "I just like him. So what? Is it against the law to like someone? I just saw the princess's sedan enter the palace. Princess, you must think of a way to save the prince consort. Save your grandma's leg." The owner of the rouge shop took the rouge she was looking at from her hand. He was so angry that the muscles on his face twitched and the veins on his forehead popped. He shouted, "Get out! You're not welcome here. Get out!" The woman was stunned for a moment. When she came back to her senses, she said angrily, "You dare to scold me!" The shopkeeper grabbed her arm and chased her out of the shop. He said angrily, "Not only do I dare to scold you, I also dare to hit you. I'll remember your donkey face. From now on, you're not allowed to step into my shop. Otherwise, I'll hit you every time I see you." Seeing the shopkeeper raise his hand, the woman ran away. The other two women glanced at her and did not chase after her. Li Mu looked at the woman running away and sighed in his heart. There was no lack of people like this woman. Fortunately, there were only a few people like her. In the hearts of most people, justice still existed. The shopkeeper of this rouge shop was a kind person. Li Mu went into the shop and bought 2 boxes of rouge. Could be considered as taking care of his business. Xiao Bai was a natural beauty. Even without makeup, she was still a peerless beauty. However, Li Mu felt that it was better for her to dress up. This way, she could reduce her charm and prevent him from having some messy dreams at night. Ever since the Empress had discovered that they slept together in the dream, she had never visited Li Mu's dream again. Li Mu had once asked Li Si this question. Of course, this was under the premise of concealing the Empress's identity. Li Si said that if a woman disregarded her identity and often went to meet a man at night, it was not because of love, but because of loneliness. Between Li Mu and the Empress, there was naturally no such thing as the former. But how could the Empress be lonely? Li Mu initially thought that Li Si was talking nonsense. However, the more he thought about it, the more he felt that what he said made sense. As the ruler of a country, the Empress was above millions of people. Because of her identity, status, and strength, the ruler of a country was often alone. They had no relatives or friends. The world only respected and feared them. In the long run, it was easy for their mentality to be suppressed to the point of perversion. Li Mu felt that the Empress was already a little inclined in this direction. In front of others, she was the noble Empress. She had to put on airs when she spoke. However, in Li Mu's dream, she was not polite at all to him. As someone who aspired to be the Empress's intimate little jacket, it was not enough to just help her solve her problems in the imperial court. He had to help her open her heart. There must be other ways besides letting her vent her feelings on him. Li Mu walked on the street, thinking about the Empress. He inadvertently glanced and saw a figure in front of him. It was a middle-aged man. He was not burly, but he was very tall and upright. His appearance was not as good as Cui Ming, but at least he was comparable to Tu Zhongchun's. Li Mu had investigated the Assistant Minister of Justice, Zhou Zhong, through Wang Wu. He did not have a wife or children. He lived in a house with 5 courtyards in the North Court. This house was bestowed by the previous emperor. Other than Zhou Zhong himself, there was only an old servant in the house. There were no other maids or servants. Li Mu did not understand why Zhou Zhong would join the old faction. His life was tight. Although the mansion he lived in was big, there were no maids or servants. Li Mu was sure that if Zhang Chun had that mansion, he would have to hire at least 8 maids, and all of them would have to be beautiful. The dragon slayer turned into an evil dragon because he coveted treasures and the princess. Zhou Zhong was not greedy for money, nor was he lustful. He did not use his power to oppress the common people. What was he after? Zhou Zhong suddenly turned around and asked, "Lord Li, you have followed me for so long. Could it be that you want to show off to me that you have captured Assistant Minister Cui?" Li Mu sneered. "Lord Zhou, don't you know why Cui Ming was captured? Since Zhou Zhong's strength could control Madame Chu and affect her mind, he could also make Madame Chu go crazy in the court of the Ministry of Justice and use Cui Ming to get rid of her. However, he did not do so. Instead, he forced Madame Chu to break through. If Zhou Zhong did not have a grudge against Cui Ming, then there was a mole in the old faction." Zhou Zhong glanced at him and said, "The affairs of the court are not as you imagine. It is too early to talk about victory or defeat." Li Mu asked, "What do you mean?" Zhou Zhong said, You will know by tomorrow at the latest." After saying this, he turned to leave. After taking 2 steps, he paused and turned back to say, "The Chu family's matter can be considered a wake-up call for the court. If you really want to serve the people wholeheartedly, you should propose to His Majesty to take back the right to kill the people in each county." Li Mu said, "Lord Zhou, you don't have to worry about this. I have just reported this matter to His Majesty. In the future, after the counties review the cases, the case files will be submitted to the Ministry of Justice for review. His Majesty will approve it and distribute it to the counties." Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "That is good." Li Mu thought of something. He looked at Zhou Zhong and asked, "If I remember correctly, Lord Zhou pushed for this law reform more than 10 years ago. Why was it abolished later?" Zhou Zhong said indifferently, "Because His Majesty found it troublesome." Li Mu cursed inwardly. Many of the decrees and laws of His Majesty's time were left to this day. The good great Zhou was ruined by His Majesty. Now that the world was taken over by His Majesty could only blame His Majesty. Thinking of His Majesty, Li Mu could not help but think of the Empress. He sighed and said, "Her Majesty is still the most brilliant." Zhou Zhong nodded in agreement and said, "Although loyal dogs are hard to come by, they must meet a wise ruler." Li Mu rejoiced and said, "Fortunately, I met Her Majesty." Then he realized something. He raised his head and said angrily, "Who are you calling a dog?" Chapter 278. Being a subject and being a loyal dog were 2 different things. Unfortunately, many people in this world didn't understand the difference between the 2. Heaven, earth, ruler, family, and teacher. In people's hearts, these 5 were people that they had to respect and obey. This concept had been deeply rooted in people's hearts since ancient times. People had to maintain respect for heaven and earth, be loyal to their ruler, love their country, be filial to their parents, and respect their teachers. These were all virtues, but being loyal to the ruler was for the sake of love. Love didn't necessarily mean being loyal to the ruler. When faced with an incapable ruler like the previous emperor, being loyal to the ruler was no different from bringing disaster to the country. For the sake of cultivation and to realize the value of justice in his heart, Li Mu was willing to do things for the Great Zhou court and the people of Great Zhou. However, this didn't mean that he would crawl at the feet of the Empress and be a loyal dog. The Empress might be high and mighty in the eyes of others, but in Li Mu's heart, she couldn't be majestic. When he thought of how she had ravaged him in his dreams, the majestic image he had painstakingly built for her collapsed in an instant. Li Mu couldn't see through Zhou Zhong, but he knew that over the years, as the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, he had shielded many people from the old party. However, he had also made incomparable contributions to perfecting the laws of Great Zhou. If one carefully read commentary on the laws of Zhou, they would discover that Zhou Zhong would amend or add a new section of the law every once in a while. In Wei Bin's case, according to the old laws, there was no doubt that his sentence would have been reduced. However, 2 years ago, Zhou Zhong had defined rape of more than 2 people as a serious case. Wei Peng's law of Great Zhou hadn't been updated in time, and by a freak combination of factors, he had successfully obtained the death penalty for Wei Bin. If one carefully studied commentary on the laws of Zhou, it was easy to discover one thing. In the past decade or so, Zhou Zhong hadn't touched on the interests of the nobles in Shindu. Ever since the failure of the reform, he had never tried to abolish the penal code. Instead, he had used a silent method to promote the reform of the laws at the lower levels. If he hadn't revised the laws 2 years ago, Li Mu would have been able to see Wei Bin and the others in Shindu a few years later. Human nature was complicated. It was hard to label someone like Zhou Zhong as a good or bad person. However, there was no doubt that he was a smart person. He would not have said those words to Li Mu for no reason. Regarding Cui Ming, it was still too early to talk about winning or losing. Li Mu pondered for a long time. He was certain that, from the perspective of the law, Cui Ming would not be able to escape death unless the Empress protected him. Therefore, Princess Yunyang would definitely persuade the Empress Dowager or Consort Dowager to persuade the Empress. However, with the Empress's character, she would definitely not agree. After feeling sorry for the Empress for a while, he had already walked to the entrance of the Li residence. Li Mu pushed the door open and said, "Xiao Bai, come and see what I bought for you?" Li Mu stepped through the door and stopped. Xiao Bai was squatting in the garden in front of the courtyard, holding a small shovel. Other than Xiao Bai, there was also a woman standing in the garden. Xiao Bai planted the flowers she had bought a few days ago and patted the soil with the small shovel. She asked, "Sister Zhou, when will these seeds bloom?" The Empress said softly, "Step aside." Xiao Bai took the shovel and walked out of the garden. When she saw Li Mu, she said happily, "Young master, you're back." Li Mu had just parted with the Empress at the palace. He had gone to the secretariat and chatted with Zhou Zhong on the street, which had taken up a lot of time. However, she had arrived home before Li Mu. It seemed that she had been at the Li residence for a while. The Empress glanced at him and said, "The palace will not be peaceful for the next 2 days. I came to your place to hide." Li Mu immediately understood what she meant. For Cui Ming's case, Princess Yunyang would definitely ask the Empress Dowager and Imperial Concubine Dowager for help. These people were the concubines of the former emperor and the elders of the Empress. If they lowered their status and pleaded for Cui Ming, the Empress would definitely be in a dilemma. Under such circumstances, it was not a bad idea to not see and not hear. Li Mu thought for a while and asked, "How long will your Majesty be hiding here? Do you need me to clean up a room for you?" Xiao Bai put down the shovel and said with a smile, "I've talked to Sister Zhou. She will sleep with me tonight." Li Mu sighed. When would Xiao Bai become more vigilant? During the time when Li Mu returned from the palace, she had already treated the Empress as a sister. Human thoughts were complicated. For demons like her, who had grown up in the mountains and had never interacted with humans before, many of them were very naive. They were so naive that they gave people the impression that they lacked a brain. She and Bai Tingxin were both this type. Of course, the Empress was trustworthy. Li Mu was happy to see Xiao Bai build a good relationship with her. Xiao Bai still did not know that the Sister Zhou she spoke of was the richest woman in the Great Zhou. If she got closer to her, she might have a chance to grow 5 tails and 6 tails. What surprised Li Mu was that Xiao Bai was naive and ignorant. She did not have much respect for her status as the Empress. The Empress could actually put down her status and call a little fox sister. She really did not behave like an Empress at all. However, he soon realized that Li Si was probably right. She was powerful and had a high status, but she was also human. Humans would feel lonely. After becoming the Empress, she had no relatives, no friends, and even no enemies. For the sake of the throne, the Shao royal family had fought with the new party to the bitter end. However, what they were fighting for was the position of the next emperor. As the youngest transcendent expert in the Great Zhou dynasty, the Shao royal family would not dare to become her enemy. Li Mu sighed. As a person, she did not even have an enemy. No wonder she would feel lonely. Xiao Bai was silly because of this. When others knew the Empress's status, they would respect her and stay away from her. Xiao Bai was close to anyone who treated her well. This was the nature of the Heavenly Fox clan. As for Xiao Bai, because she was so beautiful that even women could not arouse the slightest jealousy, it was easy for her to capture the Empress's heart. Last time, the Empress gave her a few drops of Heavenly Fox blood essence, allowing her to advance to 4 tails. She remembered this kindness in her heart and probably forgot the task Lu Hanyan gave her. She automatically excluded the Empress from the ranks of fox spirits. While these thoughts flashed through Li Mu's mind, the Empress had already walked out of the garden. She stood outside the garden and gently waved her sleeves. Li Mu instantly felt that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the courtyard suddenly became abundant. In the garden, the seeds that Xiao Bai had just planted sprouted and broke out of the ground. They grew rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. First, green leaves were born and then buds were formed. In a short moment, the buds that had just formed buds were competing to bloom. In a few breaths of time, the garden in the Li residence was full of flowers. Li Mu marveled at the transcendent powerhouse's Taoist magic. Xiao Bai was already dumbfounded. She grabbed the Empress's sleeve and said blankly, "Sister Zhou, I want to learn this." The empress pinched her face and said, "When you grow another tail, I will teach you." Li Mu didn't tell Xiao Bai that if she wanted to reach the empress's level, she would have to grow another 3 tails and become a 7-tailed fox. Spring was a magical power that could be performed by a powerhouse in the creation realm. However, the cultivation of the 5th realm was only at the level of making the withered tree sprout. The Empress's Taoist magic that could make the withered tree bloom in a short period of time required at least the cultivation of the 7th realm. In the small courtyard, the fragrance of flowers filled the air. Xiao Bai ran into the garden, sniffing and looking around. Li Mu remembered that there was no more food at home, and the matter of Cui Ming would probably not be resolved in a day or 2. In other words, the Empress would have to stay here for at least 2 days. He looked at the Empress and asked, "Your Majesty, what kind of food do you like to eat? I will go and buy it." The Empress said lightly, "I said, you don't have to call me that outside the palace." It seemed that she really didn't like being the Empress. After leaving the palace, she didn't even say, "Your Majesty." However, in this way, Li Mu was a little troubled about how to address her. If he called her Miss Zhou, it would seem distant, but if he called her Miss Xiao, it would be a little strange. Like Xiao Bai, it didn't seem appropriate to call her sister Zhou either. Xiao Zhou, Xiao Xiao, or directly calling her by her full name would be even more inappropriate. Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, "What do you like to eat?" Since he didn't know how to address her, he might as well not address her and save himself the trouble. The Empress thought for a moment and said, "Fish tofu." There were 3 people, so 4 dishes and 1 soup should be enough. Xiao Bai liked to eat chicken and the Empress liked to eat fish. Li Mu made steamed sea bass, Xiao Bai's favorite stewed chicken with mushrooms, braised tofu, and casually stir-fried some vegetables. The last dish was the soup that Xiao Bai spent 2 hours to meticulously brew. Without Mr. Mei and Shangguan Li, and with Xiao Bai's liveliness, this meal was much more lively than the last time. Gradually, Li Mu also realized something. He could completely treat Zhou Yi of the Li residence and the Empress in the palace separately. The woman sitting opposite him now was not the monarch of a country. She was just an elder sister who had the same name as the Empress and whom Xiao Bai had just met. At the dinner table in the Li residence, the atmosphere was harmonious. In a hall in the West Palace, Princess Yunyang knelt on the ground and begged, "Mother, please save the prince consort." Opposite her, a woman who looked to be about the same age as her and who also looked very similar to her slowly stood up. She said coldly, "Back then, I advised you that Cui Ming's status is not good enough for you, but you refused to listen to me. Now that he has caused trouble, you only know to come and beg me?" Princess Yunyang stepped forward, hugged her leg, and said, "Mother, no matter what, he is still my prince consort. I have already lost 1 prince consort. Do you want me to lose another one?" She was her daughter after all. The woman sighed, helped her up and said, "Okay, I will put down my old face and beg His Majesty." Princess Yunyang stood up, wiped her tears, and said happily, "I knew it. Mother is the best." A moment later, at the gate of Shangyang Palace, looking at the woman in the palace dress walking slowly, Shangguan Li bowed and said, "Greetings, Imperial Dowager." The woman in the palace dress asked, "Is His Majesty in the palace? I have something to see His Majesty." Shangguan Li looked at the woman in the palace dress, shook her head and said, "Imperial Dowager, His Majesty is not in the palace." Chapter 279. West Palace, Yongshou Palace. The imperial concubine returned less than a minute after leaving the palace. Princess Yunyang hurried out and asked, "Mother, what did she say?" The imperial concubine said calmly, "She's not in the palace." Princess Yunyang's expression changed. She said flatly, "That's impossible. She's no longer a member of the Zhou family. If she's not in the palace, where else could she be?" The imperial concubine said calmly, "It's true that she's not in the palace. She probably predicted that you would ask me to beg her. Tomorrow, the imperial concubine temple will judge the prince consort according to the law. She doesn't want to see us." Princess Yunyang said anxiously, "Mother, What should we do now? You have to help me think of a way. The imperial concubine thought for a while. She looked at her and asked, Do you really have to save him? Princess Yunyang nodded and said, No matter what, I have to save him. The imperial concubine thought for a long time and finally sighed. She walked into her bedroom and took out a wooden box from under her pillow. She opened the wooden box and handed a golden token to Princess Yunyang. She said, This token was given by the late emperor. I only have one. Take it to the Imperial Concubine Temple tomorrow and give it to Prince Shou. He'll know what to do. Princess Yunyang asked suspiciously, This token can save the prince consort? The Imperial Concubine said, You just have to do as I say. Li residence. Li Mu put the tofu that the Empress asked for into the boiling pot and sighed. Who would have thought that the Empress of the Great Zhou, a seventh realm transcendent powerhouse, would not be in the palace but sit here and eat hot pot with them? Most of the food in the palace was exquisite. The special feature was that the quantity was small and the presentation was very particular. Of course, the taste was not bad. Needless to say, the culinary skills of the imperial chefs were top-notch. Those who could cook in the palace were all at the top of the industry. The palace cuisine used the best ingredients and had the most meticulous processing. Li Mu was fortunate enough to eat it twice, and it was really a pleasure. In comparison, hot pot was much simpler. Some simple vegetables were put in the pot and boiled. In terms of taste, it was naturally incomparable to the delicacies in the palace. However, when a few people gathered together, their faces flushed red from the heat, and they fought over a piece of cooked tofu. This kind of different atmosphere was something that could never be experienced in the palace. When she was eating in the palace, no one dared, and no one had the right to sit with her. Li Mu stole a glance at the Empress. He couldn't help but wonder if the Empress had a twin sister who looked just like her. The one in the palace was the Empress, and the one outside was her sister. Li Mu scooped up a piece of meat for himself and said, Today, the Zongjing Temple's final trial of Cui Ming should be over soon. The Empress put down her chopsticks and looked in the direction of the Imperial Clan Temple. She counted with her fingers, and her beautiful eyebrows suddenly furrowed. Li Mu noticed her strange behavior and asked, What's wrong? The Empress stood up and said, I'm going back to the palace. As soon as she finished speaking, her figure disappeared in front of Li Mu and Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai's mouth was stuffed with food, and she swallowed it with great difficulty. She exclaimed, Sister Zhou is so awesome. Li Mu patted her head and said, You eat first. I'll go to the palace. The Empress originally planned to avoid the matter of Cui Ming here, but after only one night, she changed her mind. It seemed that something had happened at the Imperial Clan Temple. Li Mu remembered Zhou Zhong's reminder, so he walked out of the house and went straight to the palace. At the Imperial Clan Temple, the final trial of Cui Ming's case was held today at the Imperial Clan Temple. Many officials gathered in the Imperial Clan Temple to listen to the trial. King Shou looked at the old party members with a helpless expression and asked, The crimes committed by Prince Consort Cui are enough for him to die 100 times. Tell me, what should I do? If I kill him, he's one of us. If I don't kill him, I'll be bending the law for my own benefit. How am I going to explain it to His Majesty and the people? I'm so troubled. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel asked, Is there still no news from the princess and the dowager? Someone said, The princess went to the palace yesterday to beg the dowager for help. I heard that the dowager went to see His Majesty, but His Majesty wasn't in the palace. He didn't return last night. His Majesty didn't return last night. If His Majesty didn't return to the palace, where else could he have gone? Could it be the Zhou family? Impossible. His Majesty has long lost contact with the Zhou family. He must be hiding from the dowager and the princess. It's obvious that His Majesty doesn't want to get involved in this matter. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel coughed and said, Don't talk about His Majesty. The most important thing now is Assistant Minister Cui. King Shou waved his hand and said, I can't save him, but I can't not save him either. Who can tell me what I should do? Zhou Zhong said faintly, We can't save Assistant Minister Chui. If we save him, it will implicate King Shou. Moreover, King Shou can only save him for a while. When the time comes, King Shou will be implicated and the Imperial Clan Temple will change hands. Assistant Minister Chui's case still needs to be retried, so let's not waste our efforts. King Shou said. What Assistant Minister Zhou said makes sense. Why don't we just forget about it? As soon as he said that, an Imperial Clan Temple official ran in and announced loudly, Princess Yunyang has arrived. Greetings, Princess. When Princess Yunyang walked in, everyone greeted her. Princess Yunyang bowed to King Shou and said, Greetings, uncle. You may dispense with the formalities. King Shou waved his hand and said, Have you found a way to save the prince consort? Princess Yunyang nodded and said, I found it. King Shou was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He said in disbelief, You found it. Princess Yunyang took out the golden token and said, Uncle, please take a look. When he saw the golden token, King Shou realized something. He patted his head and said disappointedly, How could I forget about this? Princess Yunyang said in surprise, Uncle, you don't seem too happy? King Shou sighed and said, I'm just blaming myself. If I had thought of this earlier, the prince consort wouldn't have to suffer so much. The imperial noble consort didn't tell her the use of the token. Princess Yunyang quickly asked, Uncle, can this token really save the prince consort? King Shou took the token and weighed it in his hand. He nodded and said, This is a token that the late emperor ordered the Ministry of Works to make with meteoric iron in order to reward the important officials of the imperial court. The token is also plated with a layer of fine gold. The holder of this token will be exempted from the death penalty unless they commit treason. There are a total of 13 death exemption tokens. The imperial noble consort was very favored by the late emperor. It seems that the late emperor also gave her one. Someone asked, Can the imperial noble consort's token save Assistant Minister Chui? King Shou nodded and said, As long as the imperial noble consort is willing, this token can save anyone. When the officials of the old party heard this, they were all delighted. The Assistant Minister of Personnel asked, Can this token absolve Assistant Minister Chui of his crimes? King Shou said, It can, but it can't. Those who use the death exemption token will be stripped of their post and salary. This token can save his life, but he will no longer be the Assistant Minister of the Secretariat. He will only be the Prince Consort in name, but not in reality. The imperial court will have to take back his residence and no longer give him the salary of a prince consort. Chui Ming was the assistant minister of the Secretariat. This position allowed them to be the first to know about the state's affairs. They could control the imperial court through the decisions of the Secretariat. After the incident in Yang County, the assistant minister of personnel used Chui Ming to order the imperial court to reward the evil spirit. Once he lost this position, the old party would lose a large part of their control over the imperial court. In other words, even if he could keep his life, he would be useless to the old party. The assistant minister of personnel sighed and said, This is already the best ending. Moments later, in the imperial clan estate, at the entrance of the prison, Zhang Chun blocked King Shou's path and shouted angrily, What? You want to release Chui Ming? Chui Ming committed such a grave crime and you want to release him? Do you have no respect for the law? King Shou held up the token and said, This is the death exemption token granted by the late emperor. Those who hold this token will be exempted from the death penalty except for those who have committed treason. This is the law. Zhang Chun said loudly, You are using the death exemption token from the late emperor. What are you doing to His Majesty? King Shou snorted and said, A ruler doesn't joke. The death exemption token represents the dignity of the imperial family and the Great Zhou. As long as the Great Zhou still exists, this token will be effective. Those who see this token will be the same as seeing the late emperor. Those who resist this token will be the same as resisting the imperial edict. Those who resist the edict will be executed and the three races will be exterminated. Zhang Chun stepped aside and extended his hand. Please. When Li Mu arrived at the imperial clan office, He learned from Zhang Chun that Cui Ming had returned with Princess Yunyang. At the critical moment when the trial was about to begin, Princess Yunyang sent the death exemption token and exempted him from the death penalty. Although Cui Ming lost his position, the prince consort's residence, and his salary, he kept his life. At this moment, Li Mu finally understood the meaning of Zhou Zhong's words. It was impossible to say that everyone was equal before the law. The death exemption token granted by the late emperor was a privilege for these people. With the death exemption token, as long as they didn't rebel, they could be exempted from the death penalty even if they committed murder or arson. With the death exemption token, they could become an outlaw. This wasn't a special case in the Great Zhou. Li Mu knew that in the world he came from, this kind of thing happened a lot in history. However, the death exemption token in that world was called the Red Ink Iron Certificate. The holder of the Red Ink Iron Certificate could be exempted from the death penalty 9 times, and his descendants could be exempted from the death penalty 3 times. This was something that really happened in history. This, of course, destroyed the fairness of society and the fairness of the law. However, the law of this world was meant to serve a small number of people. In essence, the country was still governed by people and not by the law. Zhou Zhong proposed that the powerful were punished the same as the common people. Not only did he lose his position, but he also almost lost his life because the law protected the powerful, not the common people. Zhang Chun gritted his teeth and said, "There are 37 lives in the Chu family, a lousy token in exchange for 37 lives. This damn death exemption token." "I heard it." Prince Shou walked out from the side and said, "You dare to say that the death exemption token granted by the late emperor is a lousy token? Zhang Chun, I finally got something on you." "What did I say just now?" Zhang Chun looked at Li Mu and asked, "Li Mu, did you hear it?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "No." Zhang Chun looked at Prince Shou and said, "I didn't say anything. Your Highness, don't slander me." Prince Shou snorted at Zhang Chun and said, "I'm in a good mood today. I can't be bothered to argue with you." Zhang Chun gritted his teeth and said, "Don't be happy too early. I won't let that bastard Cui Ming go." King Shou shrugged and said with disdain, "What else can you do? Although a death exemption medallion can only be used once. Do you have anything on Assistant Minister Cui? Can you prove that he was the one who framed the Zhejiang prefectural governor? If you can't prove it, then stop boasting in front of me." He glanced at Li Mu and Zhang Chun and said, "Let's go home and watch the opera." Chapter 280. The death exemption medallion can only be used once? Everyone can only be spared once? Li Mu and Zhang Chun looked at each other. They had obtained some important information from King Shou's words. The death exemption medallion was a one-time use item. Moreover, the same person could not be spared twice. This meant that if they found evidence of Cui Ming's crimes, even if Princess Yunyang could take out the death exemption medallion, she would not be able to pardon Cui Ming like this time. It had been more than a decade since the Zhejiang prefectural governor colluded with the devil sect. The chances of a witness surviving were very small. When Su He and Madame Chu died, Cui Ming had not yet started cultivating. This was why there was a possibility that the souls of Su He and Madame Chu still existed. After gaining the support of the Zhejiang prefectural governor, Cui Ming's cultivation would definitely increase greatly in a short time, just like Li Si. At that time, Cui Ming would be even more thorough. The Zhejiang prefectural governor's family would probably not even have their souls left. Using this clue to force Cui Ming to his death was very unlikely. However, Li Mu still had Su He. As long as she came out of seclusion, he could bring her to the divine capital and tell her about what happened back then. No one would be able to protect Cui Ming. Although Su He did not tell Li Mu about her, it was clear that Cui Ming was the first to get engaged to her. Then, he gained the support of the Chu clan. Then, he killed the entire Chu clan for the daughter of the Zhejiang prefectural governor. After that, he married Princess Yunyang. Li Mu looked at King Shou's departing figure. He had enough reason to suspect that Cui Ming's position in the old faction was really that high. Or was it just because he was handsome that all the men in the divine capital were jealous of him, even if they were his accomplices? This reason was no longer important. What was important was that Li Mu had to return to the northern county. He had planned to return to the northern county after Cui Ming was executed. Now that Cui Ming had been rescued, it was even more necessary for him to go there. After visiting Yu Hanyun and Wan Wan on Mount Baiyun, he still had to go to the Bay of Clearwater to wait for Su He to come out of seclusion. She had been in seclusion for nearly half a year. No matter how slow her advancement was, she should have come out of seclusion in the near future. Not everyone was as lucky as Xiao Yu and Madame Chu. On the path of cultivation, Su He had a much harder time. Perhaps it was because her resentment was different from Xiao Yu and Madame Chu. Before Xiao Yu died, she suffered a great injustice. She was able to ascend to the 5th level with her incantation that shook the heavens. Madame Chu's entire clan had been killed. In the past 20 years after her death, she had no other feelings in her heart other than hatred towards Cui Ming. As long as she could kill Cui Ming, she was even willing to let her soul dissipate. This was the biggest difference between Su He and Madame Chu. In Mrs. Chu's heart, there was only ruthless killing intent. However, the feeling that Su He gave Li Mu was that of a living person. She had joy and anger, resentment and worry, and she was also mischievous and mischievous. She often teased Li Mu until his face turned red. Although they had both died once, as spiritual bodies, Madame Chu lived for hatred while Su He lived for herself. Li Mu walked out of the Zongjing temple. He didn't go out of the palace. Instead, he walked towards Shangyang Palace. Before returning to the North County, he needed to inform the Empress. Nominally, he was the arrestor of the Luoyang government and the imperial censor of the palace. However, his most important identity was the Empress's internal guard. The Luoyang government and the censorate couldn't control him. Shangguan Li stood outside the gate of Shangyang Palace. Li Mu walked over and said, "I have something to discuss with Her Majesty." Shangguan Li turned and walked into the main hall. Soon, she came out and said, "Let's go in." Li Mu walked into the main hall and found that Mr. Mei and Madame Chu were both there. Madame Chu's breath was extremely unstable. Obviously, she already knew that Cui Ming had been released. Li Mu walked to her and said, "I hope you don't blame Her Majesty. Her Majesty can't change the fact that Princess Yunyang took out the death-free golden medallion. Even the Empress couldn't do anything about the former Emperor's death-free golden medallion. Although her surname was Zhou and not Xiao, she still had to address the former Emperor as father. If she didn't acknowledge the former Emperor's death-free golden medallion, she would be unfilial. In history, there was once an emperor of the Great Zhou dynasty who gave a golden whip to his important officials. Even the later emperors had to be wary of him. The emperors of a country were all people who wanted to leave their names in history. No one wanted to bear the name of being unfilial. Moreover, the emperor's promise was the country's promise in the eyes of everyone. Even if everyone thought that the death-free golden medallion was unreasonable, the imperial court had to abide by it since it existed. After Madame Chu calmed down, she said, "I don't dare to blame Her Majesty. Cui Ming killed my entire family. Even if my soul is destroyed, I will make Cui Ming pay with his life. Don't be impulsive." Li Mu looked at Madame Chu and said, "I will think of a way to deal with Cui Ming." It was obviously not a good idea for Madame Chu to go against Cui Ming. She had just advanced and her strength was not stable. Cui Ming had been in the creation realm for many years and was not weak. He probably had many trump cards. If she took revenge, she would just be courting death. At this moment, the Empress said calmly, "With Cui Ming's temperament, there is a high possibility that the incident with the Zhejiang County chief was framed by him. Unfortunately, too much time has passed and it is impossible to deduce. We can only search Cui Ming's soul." Li Mu hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, we can't make an exception. Everyone, including Li Mu, had their own privacy and secrets. If the imperial court made an exception, Pandora's box would be opened. This would have a worse impact than the death-free golden medallion and the silver law of guilt. There were no secrets between people. Everyone was selfless and didn't hide anything. They didn't commit any crimes. This sounded wonderful, but it was terrifying when one thought about it. Even when the government searched the souls of people, it had to be based on a large amount of evidence. If they could pry into people's minds based on guesses, the order of the world would be messed up. Li Mu hoped that Cui Ming would die, but he could not cross the line. He looked at the Empress and said, "Your Majesty, I want to go back to the North County. When Cui Ming was in Yangqiu County, the first woman he killed has turned into a ghost cultivator. We are friends. If we invite her, we can sentence Cui Ming to death. At that time, no one will be able to protect him." Madame Chu looked at Li Mu and finally understood why Li Mu wanted Cui Ming to die. She asked, "You know that girl?" Li Mu nodded and said, "She is my friend." Madame Chu sighed and said, "I have wronged her." Li Mu shook his head and said, "The person who killed her is Cui Ming. It has nothing to do with you." The Empress thought for a while and said, "You have offended many people in the Immortals' capital. I will let Mei Wei go with you." Li Mu shook his head and said, "No need. Even if there is an accident, I can protect myself." He had also reached the level of supernatural power. The power he could use was stronger than the mana of Madame Chu and Su He. With the help of various spells, he could close the gap between normal cultivators in the Destiny realm. If he counted in the talisman's treasure, he could fight with the cultivators in Dongxian for a while. Li Mu refused to be escorted, and the Empress did not insist. She said, "Remember to come back before the imperial examinations. I hope you can participate in the examinations this time." There were still 2 months before the examinations. No matter what, it was enough. The way to become an official in the Zhou dynasty had changed. The imperial examinations had become the stepping stone. If Li Mu wanted to play a bigger role in the court, he had to participate. As long as he could pass the examinations, no matter what the Empress arranged for him in the future, no one could object. After asking for leave from the Empress, Li Mu returned home. He packed his things with Little White and planned to leave as soon as possible. The news of Princess Yunyang using the death exemption medallion to save the prince consort had spread throughout the divine capital. When the people of the divine capital heard this, they fell into a long silence. In the play, Chun Shimi abandoned his wife and son, and in the end he was punished by the heavens. The audience was delighted. However, in reality, Prince Consort Cui killed his wife and exterminated his family. He bore the burden of dozens of lives, but he was still able to get away with it. As the prince consort, he enjoyed endless glory and wealth. Play was ultimately just a play. The Ministry of Justice. The director of the Ministry of Justice sat in the guardroom and sighed. "I didn't expect Princess Yunyang to have such a move. The death exemption medallion bestowed by the late emperor is probably something that even His Majesty can't object to. Whoever has the medallion has an extra life and can do whatever they want in the Zhou dynasty." As the director of the Ministry of Justice, although he would sometimes cover for people from the old faction, it was within the scope of the law. Assistant Minister Zhou once said that if the law was not fair to everyone, then the law would be meaningless. According to Assistant Minister Zhou, the death exemption medallion should not exist in the first place. The Assistant Minister's office. Zhou Zhong sat behind the desk and flipped open a book on the table. The book was blank. There was only a page in the middle that was densely filled with words. Upon closer inspection, one would realize that it was a list of names. There were 13 neatly written names on the paper. 3 of the names had been crossed out. Zhou Zhong picked up a pen and gently crossed out the words Imperial Noble Consort. Chapter 281. Li Mu packed up his things and waited for Xiao Bai in the courtyard. When he thought of Cui Ming's ending, he still felt some regret. In fact, he originally wanted to deal with Cui Ming himself without Su He doing anything. At that time, Su He would not have to come to Chengdu and would not have to see Cui Ming. The incident from 20 years ago would also not cause her any harm. He did not expect that the Great Zhou actually had something like a death exemption medallion. In order to punish Cui Ming, he had planned for half a month. He had written a script to create public opinion, and he had also coaxed and pestered the 6 officials of the Imperial Secretariat. After much difficulty, He finally sent Zhang Chun to the Imperial Clan Temple and successfully took down Cui Ming. In the end, he lost to a broken medallion. There were too many misdeeds left behind by the previous emperor. After one was dealt with, another one would appear. It was impossible to guard against it. If he lived for a few more decades, the Great Zhou would be destroyed by his hands sooner or later. A piece of scrap metal could destroy the justice of the law. It was the biggest stain on the Great Zhou's law and could not be tolerated. When he returned from the northern county, he would sooner or later turn those medallions into real scrap metal. Xiao Bai walked out of the room with a small bag on her back. She happily said, "Benefactor, I'm done packing. Let's go." Li Mu looked at the bulging bag on her shoulder and said helplessly, "We're not moving. Why are you bringing this?" Xiao Bai tightened the bag and said, "This is a gift for Sister Lu and Wan Wan." Although the little fox was usually a little silly and dull, she was very considerate. Li Mu did not say anything else. He was about to leave when he suddenly thought of something. He asked Xiao Bai, "When we return to the northern county, if Sister Lu asks you if I've been fooling around in Shindu, how will you answer?" Xiao Bai said without hesitation, "Other than me, there are no other little fox spirits by your side." "Very good." Li Mu patted her head and said, "Let's go." Not being a womanizer was completely different from not having a woman by his side. In addition to Mr. Mei, Li Mu had close contact with her friends in the Great Music Bar, including Miao Miao, Inin, Little 7, 16, and the Queen, who had come here twice for free meals. Although Li Mu had a clear conscience, he still wanted to give Xiao Bai a heads up in advance so that she wouldn't stupidly shoot her mouth off and say something she shouldn't. Now, it seemed that the little girl was not as foolish as Li Mu had imagined. The two of them left the city and walked out of the no-fly zone outside the divine capital. Li Mu looked back at the distant divine capital and took out 2 high-level talismans. He handed one to Xiao Bai and stuck the other to himself. In the next moment, the two of them flew into the air and disappeared into the horizon. He had many enemies in the divine capital. Since he dared to swagger out of the divine capital, he naturally had something to rely on. Lu Hanyan had asked Li Si to give him a thick stack of high-level talismans for escaping. Anyone with ulterior motives who wanted to follow them under the Dongxian wouldn't even be able to see their backs. Not long after the two of them disappeared, on the main road, not far behind them, a cloaked figure lifted the bamboo hat on his head, and a look of shock appeared on his face. So fast! He looked up at the sky in front of him. In a few breaths, he could no longer see the two of them. Even if he used his fastest Dharma treasure, he couldn't match their speed. He stood in the same place for a while and had no choice but to turn back. Entering the fairy's capital again, he circled around a few streets before entering a mansion in the southern courtyard. After entering the mansion, he walked straight to the deepest courtyard. A short conversation could be heard from the courtyard. A moment later, the sound of tables and chairs being overturned, porcelain shattering, and a woman's hysterical cursing could be heard from the room in the courtyard. The princess residence. After returning from the Imperial Clan Temple, the prince consort's residence had been searched. Everything in the prince consort's residence, including the residence, had been confiscated by the imperial court. Cui Ming could only stay in the princess residence. In a bedroom of the princess mansion, moaning sounds rose and fell one after another, continuous and unending. For hours later, Cui Ming walked out of the bedroom. When he pushed open the door, he could vaguely see the scene in the room. Cui Ming stood in the courtyard and adjusted his belt. A servant walked in from outside and bowed. "Prince Consort, Li Mu just left the divine capital." Cui Ming's face darkened when he heard Li Mu's name. He had used more than 20 years to climb step by step to the position of assistant minister of the secretariat. During this time, he had gone through countless hardships and setbacks and spent a lot of essence and blood to reach his current position. In one night, Li Mu had made him lose everything. This huge difference and turn had almost caused his mentality to completely collapse and give birth to an inner demon. Although he had suppressed it with great difficulty, he had also lost several years of cultivation, causing his realm to drop greatly. He had almost fallen from the creation realm to the transcendent realm. This matter would not only affect his future cultivation, but he could only wait until the Shao clan regained the throne if he wanted to make a comeback. All of this was because of Li Mu. He wanted to skin him alive, pull out his tendons, remove his bones, and refine his soul. However, in the divine capital, with his majesty protecting him, he had no chance to do so. Li Mu's departure from the divine capital was exactly what he wanted. Cui Ming asked, "Where did he go?" The servant said, "From the direction he left the city, it should be the North County." North County. Cui Ming's face darkened when he heard this. The North County meant a lot to him. The North County was his starting point. He had taken his first step in the North County and walked step by step to where he was today. However, the North County was also his final destination. Because of his carelessness in the North County more than 20 years ago, his 20 years of accumulation and hard work had gone to waste. Cui Ming muttered, "Li Mu is as cunning as a fox. Many people in the divine capital hate him to the bone and want him to die without a complete corpse. Why would he suddenly leave the divine capital and go to the North County? Could it be?" Cui Ming suddenly woke up. Could it be that he wants to find Su He? The moment he thought of this, his face turned completely gloomy. Madame Chu had already made him lose everything. If the fact that he had killed Su He in order to climb up to the Chu clan was exposed, even the death exemption medallion would not be able to save his life. He could either leave the divine capital now, or Li Mu would leave the divine capital and never come back. He could let him and Su He, who was very likely to become a ghost cultivator, stay in the North County together forever. Cui Ming asked in a low voice, "Has Elder Lu come back?" The servant shook his head and said, "No." Cui Ming was puzzled. He had sent Elder Lu to the North County to investigate Chu Yuner and Su He. It had been more than half a month and there was no news from him. As a fifth realm cultivator, as long as he left the divine capital and did not offend the 4 sects and 6 schools of Buddhism and Taoism, he could do whatever he wanted in any county. It was unlikely that anything had happened to him. However, if nothing had happened, why had there been no news at all for so many days? Cui Ming paced in the courtyard. After Elder Lu left, there was no one around him that he could use. However, Li Mu and Su He were bound to die. If they did not die, Cui Ming would be the one to die. Cui Ming's expression changed for a while. Finally, he gritted his teeth and flipped his hand. A palm-sized bronze mirror appeared in his hand. He walked to the study and bit his fingertip. Using blood as ink, he wrote a few lines on the bronze mirror. Then, he put down the bronze mirror and crossed his hands. After forming a few seals, he sent his spirit energy into the bronze mirror. A white light flashed on the bronze mirror, and the blood-red words on it slowly disappeared, as if they were being swallowed by something. Imperial Palace. In the Imperial Garden. The garden was full of flowers. The Empress walked slowly among the flowers. Mr. Mei walked in from outside and said, "Your Majesty, Li Mu has left the divine capital." In the short time that he left, there were many movements in the southern and northern courtyards. Do we really not need to send people to protect him? The Empress smiled and said, "He's not as weak as you think. Even 1,000 illusion Shangren died in his hands. What can those people do to him? You've seen him bully others, but when have you seen others bully him?" Mr. Mei thought about it carefully and realized that it was true. Although Li Mu had offended many people, those who dared to bully him did not end up well. Being beaten with a cane was a light punishment. Those who were more serious would not be able to keep their heads. Those who were more serious would be chopped into ashes on the street. The prince consort of Princess Lianyang lost his official position and had his property confiscated. Many people in the court called him Her Majesty's Little Fox after betraying him. Mr. Mei recalled the process of meeting Li Mu. He spoke softly, was good-looking, liked to laugh, did things in a straightforward manner, was righteous, and did not want to compromise. Who would have thought that he was also full of tricks when he was up to no good? Thinking of this, she inadvertently glanced at the Empress. She saw a faint smile on the Empress's face. At that moment, the beauty of the Empress even overshadowed the flowers in the garden. Mr. May was dazed for a moment. Ever since she married the Crown Prince, she rarely saw such a smile on the Empress's face. Chapter 282. Shindu. 20 years ago, the prince consort, Chui Ming, killed his wife and exiled her family. After Princess Yunyang took out the death exemption medallion bestowed by the late emperor, Chui Ming was released from the ancestral temple. The people's discussion gradually died down. The play Chan Shimi, which was very popular in Shindu, was also banned under the instructions of the old party. This play involved the prince consort, the princess, and even the old consort. It was suspected of insinuating and smearing the reputation of the royal family. All the major theaters were not allowed to perform this play anymore. Those who violated the rules would be punished according to the law. Ever since a few theaters were banned and closed down, Chan Shimi, which was popular for a while, was no longer sung in Shindu. Although the people did not dare to say it out loud, they could not help but laugh in their hearts. What insinuating and smearing? It was all nonsense. Reality was worse than the play. In the play, Chun Shimi abandoned his wife and children and ended up dying a horrible death. Prince Consort Chui, who was a traitor, did all kinds of evil things. He was 1,000 times more hateful than Chun Shimi. In the end, he still got away with it and continued to be a relative of the royal family. Chui Ming's case came to an end. More major events were happening in Shindu every day. After the reform of the imperial court selection system, the first imperial examination became the most important thing. The talents recommended by the 36 counties gradually gathered in Shindu. What happened a few days ago would soon be forgotten. North County. Bayun Mountain. When Li Mu followed Yuzhen back to the mountain last time, the disciples of the ancestral court of Fulu School had already seen him. After Li Mu explained his intentions, 2 disciples personally brought him and Xiao Bai to Bayun Mountain. The 4 of them landed on the square in front of the palace on Bayun Mountain. Someone in the palace sensed them and 2 people walked out. One was an old man and the other was an old woman. The old woman on the right was called Hua Yangzi. She was the one who brought Li Mu and Lu Hanyan to tour the entire Bayun Mountain. After greeting each other, the old woman looked at Li Mu with a surprised gaze. The last time he saw him, he had only just condensed his spirit. It had only been 2 months, but the aura on his body had already become extremely obscure. It was obvious that he had already stepped into the divine ability realm. For those with average aptitude, it would take 10 to 20 years or even longer to advance from astral focus to divine ability, but he only took 2 months. This kind of cultivation speed was simply terrifying. It was comparable to the top geniuses of the ancestral court. Although the speed of those geniuses entering the middle realm was fast, but that was because they had more than 10 years of accumulation. The last time she saw Li Mu, he was just an ordinary divine condensation cultivator. Without a doubt, he must have encountered a great opportunity in these 2 months. Everyone had their own fortuitous encounters. The old woman stopped thinking about it and said with a smile, "I'll take you to junior sister Lu's residence." On top of White Cloud Peak, there was a mountain with an abundance of heaven and earth spiritual energy. Most of the disciples on the mountain lived together. Only the elders and core disciples above the transcendent realm had the right to establish their own residence on the mountain. As the disciple of the first seat, Lu Hanyan's status was equal to that of the elders. The place where she lived was full of spiritual energy and beautiful scenery. It was a place that countless disciples and even many elders envied. At this moment, she was sitting at a stone table in the courtyard with one hand supporting her chin. She watched the flowing clouds leisurely float by in front of her eyes. White cranes flew among the clouds and cried out clearly. However, she was not in the mood to enjoy the scenery or cultivate. She was in a daze out of habit. The clouds floating by the distant mountain gradually transformed into the appearance of a person in her eyes. When she was young, she was sold to the music hall by her parents. She did not have enough to eat every day. She practiced the zither until she could not lift her arms. She gritted her teeth and endured it. Now, she could not bear to miss a person. In these 2 months, she wanted to go to the divine capital with Wanwan to find Li Mu more than once, but she also resisted this idea more than once. For the first time in more than 10 years, she had found someone she could rely on, but she didn't want to completely rely on him. In order to have the ability to face some things with him, she had finally hardened her heart and made this decision. She absolutely couldn't give up halfway. That night, she watched him face a life and death crisis alone, while she could only hide in a safe place. She did not want to experience it again. Wanwan rested her chin on her hands and sat across from her. She muttered, "I wonder how young master is doing in the immortals' capital. Is he eating well? Is he wearing good clothes? Is he living well? Is he being bullied? Those bad people in the immortals' capital love to bully people." Hearing Wanwan's words, Lu Hanyen could not help but worry. She had been in the divine capital for more than 10 years. She knew better than anyone what the divine capital was like. The imperial court there was dark. The officials were muddle-headed. The people were numb, and the children of the rich and powerful were lawless. If they committed crimes, they only needed to pay for it with silver. They did not need to be punished by the law. The students of the academy bullied women. Many women from good families were tainted by them. If she did not refuse to play the solo in the pavilion, she would not have been able to keep her innocence until today. With Li Mu's personality, he would definitely be at a disadvantage in a place like the divine capital. Thinking of this, Lu Hanyen could not help but worry even more. Wanwan shook her head and said, "I wonder where the young master is. Does he know any pretty girls?" Luckily, Xiaobai is by his side. Lu Hanyen was worried but also a little angry. She said, "When did he lack pretty girls by his side? It's been so long and there's no news at all. Maybe he has already forgotten about us." Ouch! Before she could finish her words, she suddenly let out an ouch. She felt something hit her head. Lu Hanyen turned around, but there was no one behind her. Wanwan looked behind Lu Hanyen. A strange light flashed in her limpid eyes. In the next moment, a look of surprise appeared on her little face. There was no one behind her, but Lu Hanyen was indeed attacked. Her expression changed slightly. She made a gesture with one hand and hit the empty space in front of her. He wanted to secretly appear beside her and give her a surprise, but he happened to hear her bad-mouthing him behind his back. He had kept his chastity for her for the past 2 months. Li Mu could not take it anymore. He lightly knocked on her head as a punishment. Facing Lu Hanyen's palm, he removed his concealment state and took the opportunity to hold her hand. He used all his mana to dissolve her attack. Li Mu interlocked his fingers with hers and said, "You're so ruthless. Are you trying to kill your husband?" "Young master." Wanwan had already jumped up from the stool and ran happily to Li Mu's side. Lu Hanyen allowed Li Mu to hold her hand. Her clear eyes flashed with a blazing surprise. Then she snorted and said, "It's been so long. You didn't even write a letter. Do you have other little foxes in Luoyang?" Li Mu looked behind him and said, "Xiaobai, testify for me." Xiaobai also removed her concealment state. She ran over and held Lu Hanyen's arm. She said, "I can testify that you didn't fool around in Luoyang. Other than me, there are no other little foxes." Lu Hanyen pinched her face and said, "You listened to him more than Wanwan. Did he teach you before he came?" Xiaobai shook her head and said, "I swear in the name of the divine fox, young master really didn't fool around outside." The divine fox was Xiaobai's religion. Lu Hanyen obviously believed in Xiaobai's promise. She raised her eyebrows slightly and held Li Mu's hand tightly. She said, "Come in. I have something to say to you." Li Mu said, "I also have something to say to you." They walked into the room. The moment the door closed, the two bodies hugged tightly. Li Mu's longing that he had endured for 2 months suddenly exploded at this moment. This longing came not only from his heart, but also from his body. The body of pure yin and pure yang had a natural attraction. After tasting the sweetness of dual cultivation, he could no longer give up. The two kissed for a long time before their lips slowly parted. A faint blush appeared on Lu Hanyan's pretty face. She said, "Let's go out. Wan Wan and Xiao Bai are still outside." Li Mu was a little reluctant to part with her. He hugged her soft body tighter and said, "What are you afraid of? They are not outsiders." After being separated for so long, Lu Hanyan was even more reluctant to let go. She said softly, "Then let's hug for a while more." The two hugged each other tightly and quietly listened to each other's heartbeat. They didn't say a word, but it was better than 1,000 words. Lu Hanyan was still a little shy. After a few minutes, she pulled Li Mu out. Xiao Bai was taking out the gifts she brought from Shindu from a small bag and placing them on the table. "This is a hairpin for Sister Wan Wan. This is rouge for Sister Han Yen. This is the flower seed that benefactor and I bought in Shindu. It will be beautiful after it blossoms." After distributing the gifts, she couldn't wait to plant the flowers in the flower bed outside with Wan Wan. Wan Wan watered the flower bed and asked, "When will these seeds bloom?" Xiao Bai was stunned for a moment. Then, she shook her head and said, "I don't know. When we were in Shindu, Sister Zhou just waved her sleeves and they suddenly grew." Li Mu keenly sensed that his grip on his hand tightened. Lu Hanyan stood in front of the flower bed and looked at Xiao Bai. She smiled and asked, "Which Sister Zhou?" Chapter 283. Xiao Bai paused for a moment before saying, "That's right. That's right." Li Mu took the initiative to say, "It's Her Majesty the Empress." This time, it was Lu Hanyan's turn to be stunned. She couldn't believe her ears and even forgot to be jealous. She asked, "What did you say?" Li Mu explained, "You also know that when I was in North County, I did some things that were beneficial to Her Majesty. After coming to Shindu, Her Majesty valued me very much. One time, Her Majesty went on a private tour and happened to come to our house. Xiao Bai met her at that time. At this moment, what he said to Lu Hanyan was the truth. However, he tactfully chose to hide the fact that he was ravaged by the Empress in his dream and was caught by her in his wet dream. Without waiting for her to ask in detail, Li Mu asked in return, "Don't tell me you suspect that I have some kind of ambiguous relationship with Her Majesty?" Lu Hanyan pinched his waist and said angrily, "Don't offend Her Majesty." Li Mu said, "It's okay. This is North County. She can't hear." Lu Hanyan stomped her feet. "That's still not okay." Li Mu said, "Okay, okay, okay. I won't say any more. I'll listen to you." The men of Great Zhou might not be convinced that a woman was the Empress, but Li Mu knew that many women in Great Zhou respected and worshipped the Empress. In addition to Shangguan Li, Lord Zhang's daughter also seemed to regard the Empress as her idol. He didn't expect that even Lu Hanyan would be so protective of her. If they knew that the Empress was not only dignified but also had an S-side, the image in their hearts would probably immediately collapse. Hearing that Her Majesty took good care of Li Mu, Lu Hanyan was finally relieved. As for whether the two of them had any other relationship, she didn't have a trace of doubt at all. The Empress was the symbol of nobility, majesty, and holiness. As long as she had such thoughts, she felt that it was an unforgivable sin. After putting on the identity of the Empress, there was no need for Li Mu to explain who Big Sister Zhou was. He sized up Lu Hanyan with a glance and said in disbelief, "You have mystical power so quickly?" A moment ago when Lu Hanyan attacked him, Li Mu discovered that her cultivation had already reached the middle realm. Li Mu himself had done countless good deeds in the divine capital. He had absorbed the willpower of countless commoners, spent countless spirit jades, and worked like a horse for the Empress. With her help, he had been able to upgrade his divine ability in 2 months. After arriving at Mount Baiyun, he realized that Lu Hanyan's improvement in the past 2 months was even greater than his. Lu Hanyan said with a little pride, "In the past 2 months, I have been cultivating well. Master has also helped me a lot in my cultivation." As she spoke, she looked at Li Mu and asked in confusion, "Why are you also upgrading so quickly?" After consuming a lot of the sect's resources and with the help of her master, she was able to advance a few days ago. She thought that when Li Mu came back and saw that her cultivation had surpassed his, he would be shocked. But what she didn't expect was that just like her, he had also advanced to the middle realm. Li Mu glanced at her and said, "Do you think you are the only one who has been cultivating well?" He actually said this with a little guilty conscience. In the past 2 months, he had only cared about fighting with the officials, the rich, and the old parties. Where would he find the time to cultivate hard? He had only used the time that others cultivated hard to take shortcuts. On the surface, he didn't seem to have guided chi cultivation, but the Empress was a 7th realm elite. Casually hugging her thigh for a while could save him years of hard cultivation. Lu Hanyan had hugged Yuzhenzi's thigh, but the Empress's thigh was obviously longer and fairer than Yuzhenzi's. Lu Hanyan said doubtfully, "That's impossible. Even if you didn't eat or drink for the past 2 months and absorbed the spiritual jades all the time, it's impossible for you to break through so quickly. You must be hiding something from me." After not seeing him for 3 days, she had a whole new level of respect for him. When it came to cultivation, Li Mu could easily fool Lu Hanyan in the past. After cultivating on Mount Baiyun for 2 months, the current Lu Hanyan was obviously not so gullible anymore. Li Mu said in amusement, "Actually, it's nothing much. I originally didn't want to break through so quickly. It was Her Majesty who helped me. Her Majesty is a 7th realm transcendent elite. She is as powerful as your sect master. This kind of thing is nothing to her." Lu Hanyan said in surprise, "Why is Her Majesty so good to you?" Li Mu said, "I exchanged all of this with my own hard work. You don't know, but in the past 2 months in Shindu, I worked like a horse for Her Majesty. I gave my all and did so many things in exchange for such an opportunity." Lu Hanyan held his hand and said sympathetically, "It's been hard on you?" "It's not hard at all." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Only when I become stronger can I have the ability to protect you. Although it's hard to work for Her Majesty is also very generous. She let me be an internal guard. Not only did she give me cultivation resources, but she also rewarded us with a 5-sectioned house. In the future, when you and Wanwan come back, you will have a big house to stay in." Lu Hanyan said in surprise, "A 5-sectioned house? Where is it?" Li Mu said, "The North Garden." Lu Hanyan was shocked. With her savings, she probably couldn't afford a 5-sectioned house in Shindu, let alone the North Garden, where the high officials and nobles lived. Without a certain status, one couldn't afford a house in that kind of place even if they had the money. "So, I simply struck him to death with a thunderbolt to prevent him from harming the people?" Lu Hanyan stared blankly at Li Mu and asked, "Is this what you meant by a trivial matter?" Chapter 284. Although Lu Hanyan trusted Li Mu completely, she still could not believe what he had just said. Those hedonistic sons of rich families were tyrannical and lawless in Fairy's capital. Lu Hanyan had grown up hearing about their misdeeds. What exactly did these people go through to change their personalities in just 2 months? As long as she could remember, there had been a law of paying for crimes. Many officials had proposed to abolish it, but in the end, there had been no result. How could it be abolished so suddenly? The academy no longer had a transcendent status, and the young ruffian of the Zhou family, Zhou Chu, was dead. Were these all the trivial things he had done in the past 2 months? Lu Hanyan looked at Xiao Bai and asked, "Is what he said true?" Xiao Bai nodded and said, "It's true. The people of Luoyang like you very much. When we buy things on the street, they don't even take our money." After the shock, Lu Hanyan was only left with worry. She looked at Li Mu worriedly and asked, "You've offended so many people. Where will you go in Luoyang in the future? Why don't you quit being an official? We'll stay in Beijun. You can cultivate with me on Mount Baiyun." Li Mu smiled and said, "Don't worry. You know how many treasures I have. Besides, Her Majesty will protect me in Luoyang. It's the safest place in Great Zhou." Li Mu and Lu Hanyan did not walk the same path of cultivation. She had a master who was at the peak of Dongxian and had a pure yin body like her. Lu Hanyan was destined to inherit the mantle of Yuzenzi. The resources of the ancestral court of Fulu School were at her disposal. However, Li Mu's cultivation depended on himself. The faith of the people was the foundation of his cultivation. Since he stood on the side of the people, he naturally had to stand on the opposite side of the privileged class. It was inevitable that he would offend people. Fortunately, he had the Empress and his own trump cards were not weak. Luoyang seemed dangerous, but it was also safe. After comforting Lu Hanyan for a while, she finally dispelled her worries. After 2 months of not seeing each other, Lu Hanyan had made rapid progress, and Wan was not bad either. Her cultivation had already reached the spirit condensation realm, and because of her Lingtong, her strength was far beyond the spirit condensation realm. Just now, when Li Mu was invisible, Lu Hanyan didn't discover him, but he couldn't hide from Wan's eyes. If Wan were to advance to the middle realm one day, her spirit eyes would probably evolve as well. After not seeing each other for 2 months, Xiaobai had endless things to talk to them about. Seeing that it was getting late, Li Mu and Lu Hanyan looked at each other and understood what each other meant. The two of them stood up at the same time and said to the 2 girls, "It's getting late, you should rest early." After a while, the 2 of them sat cross-legged on the bed in Lu Hanyan's room. Their hands were clasped together, and mana flowed back and forth between their bodies through their hands. Traces of heaven and earth spiritual qi were attracted and quickly entered their bodies. After 2 months, Li Mu once again experienced the joy of duo cultivation. Cultivation was a boring thing, but duo cultivation of yin and yang brought a special sense of pleasure to both the body and the soul. This might be the reason why they were addicted to duo cultivation. The next day, the 2 of them didn't wake up until late in the morning. After that, Li Mu rode on his sword to Qingshen Peak. After being notified by the disciples guarding the peak, Hanja quickly walked out of the Taoist palace of Qingshen Peak. He strode over and patted Li Mu on the shoulder and asked, "How was Luoyang?" Li Mu smiled. "It was fine." He looked around and didn't see the figure that often followed behind Hanja. He asked, "Where's junior sister Qin?" Speaking of junior sister Qin, Hanja looked helpless and said, "She didn't cultivate properly and always followed behind me. I asked her to go into seclusion. She's not allowed to come out until she reaches spirit concentration." As he spoke, he suddenly looked at Li Mu with a strange look and found that he couldn't see through him at all. The last time they met, the 2 of them were spirit concentration. Now, in Hanja's eyes, Li Mu was just like an ordinary person. Naturally, his cultivation couldn't have regressed. The only explanation was that Li Mu's cultivation had far surpassed his. Hanja probed, "You have divine power?" Li Mu didn't deny it and nodded slightly. Hanja was stunned for a long time before he gritted his teeth and said, "Freak! I thought junior sister Li was fast enough. I didn't expect you to be even faster." Li Mu was silent for a moment. His lips moved, but before he spoke, Hanja said, "I know what you want to ask. Junior sister Li isn't here. I've kept an eye out for you. She hasn't returned to the sect in the past 2 months. If you really want to see her, maybe you can come back in 4 months. In 4 months, it will be the Triennial Peak competition. Junior sister Li's strength is one of the best in Purple Cloud Peak. She should be back to support Purple Cloud Peak." After chatting with Hanja for a while, he went to supervise junior sister Qin's cultivation. Li Mu returned to White Cloud Peak again. Lu Hanyan was watering the flowers that Wan and Xiaobai planted yesterday. She asked, "Did you see your friend?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Yes." Lu Hanyan asked again, "Did you see Miss Li?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I didn't go to Purple Cloud Peak. When I was talking to Hanja about her, he said she wasn't in the sect." In front of Lu Hanyan, Li Mu didn't deliberately hide anything. Their relationship was only 1 step away. If he hid it too much, it would show that he was guilty. It was better to be honest. Li Mu didn't continue this topic. He asked, "Hanja said that in 4 months, there will be a grand competition in the sect. Will you participate?" Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, I don't think so. That's a competition for the younger generation. What would I do there? Li Mu almost forgot that Lu Hanyan's status was equal to the elders of the various peaks. With her strength, it would be a bit of a bully for her to participate in such a competition. The grand competition's requirements were for young disciples under the age of 25. At this age, those who could reach the spirit convergence realm were already outstanding. Those who could reach the divine power realm were already top geniuses. They either had great talent or incomparable perseverance. There weren't many people like this in the ancestral court of Fu Lu School. Although talent was very important on the path of cultivation, it was very difficult to become strong with talent alone without hard work and the accumulation of years of cultivation. Although it was rare for young people to reach the spirit convergence realm, it wasn't that they didn't exist. However, the fifth realm cultivators Li Mu had seen were mostly middle-aged or old. Xiaoyu's situation was special. The youngest creation realm cultivator he had seen was Shangguan Li. However, she was 5 or 6 years older than Li Mu. If she hadn't been by the Empress side all year round, it would have been impossible for her to become a strong cultivator so early. The Empress wanted him to return to the divine capital before the imperial examinations. There were still 2 months before the examinations. Including the preparation time, there was plenty of time. Li Mu planned to stay in the North County for a few more days to accompany them. He stayed in Baiyun Mountain for 3 days and then went to the county city with Lu Hanyan. After leaving the North County city, Lu Hanyan handed the Yunyan Pavilion to Zhang Shan to manage. He didn't make a name for himself as a constable, but he was very talented in business. He didn't let down Lu Hanyan's trust. The Yunyan Pavilion's business was getting better day by day. Zhang Shan was so busy that he lost a lot of weight. However, he was more energetic and his eyes were shining. Li Mu didn't lack cultivation resources now. He spent some effort to guide him into the path of cultivation and gave him some Fulu and Dharma treasures to protect himself. Although he didn't have to do dangerous jobs anymore, he could still cultivate to protect himself. At the very least, he could strengthen his body and prolong his life. In the county city, Li Mu accompanied Lu Hanyan for 3 more days. He originally wanted to drink with the White Demon King and see his 2 nieces. However, he only saw the Green Bull Demon. From him, he learned that after Madame Bai came out of the ice coffin, the White Demon King and his family went out to play and hadn't returned yet. Li Mu was able to return to the county city. In the end, he returned to Yangshuo County with Lu Hanyan. This was the place where they knew each other. It was also the place where Li Mu had lived the longest when he first came to this world. In these few days, the 2 of them cherished this reunion very much. They were together for almost 24 hours every day. The progress of their relationship was only 1 step away. Li Mu wasn't in a hurry. For a woman, this matter was sacred and had a sense of ceremony. It had to be left until the night of the wedding. Their original plan was to leave this day for the day of their breakthrough. They would use each other's primordial yang and primordial yin to break through to the middle realm. However, no one expected that Lu Hanyan would enter the Fulu school and Li Mu would meet the Empress. The 2 of them had already broken through to the God Power realm. They definitely couldn't wait until the next breakthrough. On the 2nd day after returning to Yangshuo County, Li Mu left the city and went to Clearwater Bay. This time, other than returning to the northern region to see Lu Hanyan and Wanwan, he also had an important mission. That was to bring Su He back to the divine capital and send Cui Ming on his way. After leaving the city, Li Mu flew on his sword and arrived at Clearwater Bay in an instant. Landing in front of the familiar hut, Li Mu was stunned as he looked at the surroundings. The illusion that Su He had set up was gone. The house by the shore had collapsed. The surrounding trees were crooked and some had even been uprooted. More importantly, the deep pool that originally existed here had dried up. The altar at the bottom of the pool was still there, but it was almost destroyed. The female corpse on the altar was also gone. Li Mu's face was gloomy as he searched the surroundings. Not only did he not find Su He's presence, but he also didn't find the 2 female ghosts. He only found the reason why the pool where the altar was located had dried up. For some unknown reason, The river that flowed through the Gulf of Clearwater suddenly changed its course 2 li before it passed through the Gulf of Clearwater, bypassing the Gulf of Clearwater. In this way, without the suppression of the water vein, the formation on the altar at the bottom of the sea would immediately lose its effect, unable to trap the female corpse underwater. Li Mu looked around and saw the mess by the shore of Clearwater Bay. Could this be caused by the battle between the female corpse and Suhi after she escaped? Although they were of the same origin, one was a soul and the other was a physical body. They both wanted to devour each other's consciousness to reach perfection. When the two appeared at the same time, a great battle was unavoidable. Li Mu carefully thought about it and relaxed a little. After refining part of Thousand Illusions' soul force, Suhi's strength was much stronger than that of the spirit corpse. If she stayed in the array, she would have a chance to retain her consciousness. Once she left the altar, she would be killed by Suhi and her body would be taken over. Li Mu didn't have to worry about Suhi at all. What he cared about now was where Suhi had gone. Chapter 285. At the shore of the Bay of Jade. Li Mu carefully examined the traces in the surroundings and confirmed that they were the result of a battle. The river that flowed through the Bay of Jade had also changed its course because the fierce battle had shattered the cliffs and blocked the original channel, causing the altar at the Bay of Jade to lose its water supply. Gradually, Li Mu discovered a few more problems. According to his initial deduction, the change in the river's course should have caused the altar's formation to weaken, allowing the spiritual corpse at the bottom to break out of the formation and engage in a great battle with Suhi. However, after careful examination, Li Mu felt that there should have been 2 experts above the 5th level fighting here. They had shattered the cliffs and forced the river to change its course, causing the female corpse at the bottom to break out of the formation. One of the 5th level experts had to be Suhi, so who could the other be? The possibility of it being a passing expert was not high. Many cultivators like to kill ghosts and demons indiscriminately. However, even cultivators who wanted to slay demons and protect the Tao would consider their own strength. They would definitely not fight with experts of the same level. If they fought with experts of similar strength, both sides would often be injured. Cultivation was not easy. No one wanted to be injured and cause their cultivation to drop, unless their target was Suhi. Who could have such a deep grudge against her? The answer was already obvious. Cui Ming. If Li Mu could think of Suhi, how could Cui Ming not think of it? After luckily escaping Madame Chu's calamity, he would definitely want to cut the weeds and eliminate all threats to him. Suddenly, Li Mu felt all the hairs on his body stand on end as a great sense of danger arose. He abruptly turned around and looked behind him. Behind him was a messy forest. A few trees had been overturned and those that were still standing on the ground were also swaying left and right. For some reason, this forest gave him an incomparably strange feeling. However, no matter whether he used his heaven's eye or opened his eyes, he could not see anything strange about this forest. Li Mu's eyes flashed slightly. He turned his back to the forest and slowly walked towards the dried-up pool. Whoosh! The sound of wind breaking came from behind him. A branch from a poplar tree closest to Li Mu suddenly shot out and stabbed at Li Mu's back. The speed of the branch was unbelievably fast. Li Mu subconsciously dodged and avoided it, but his arm was still stabbed. After the branch pierced Li Mu's arm, it directly collapsed. However, there was no wound on Li Mu's arm, nor was there any blood. Bang! On the other hand, a strange sound suddenly came from the trunk of the poplar tree. Wood chips flew everywhere, and a large hole appeared on the trunk. The wholeness formula was a substitution technique. After Li Mu advanced to a divine ability, he could already master it. This technique could divert a portion of fatal damage. For such an attack, it could divert all of it. After the first attack failed, more branches madly grew out of the poplar tree and attacked Li Mu at lightning speed. Li Mu unsheathed Bai and faced the attacking branches. There was a sound similar to metal clashing. Bai slashed at the branches, but only left a shallow mark. He did not expect the branches to be so tough. They were not inferior to magic items. Li Mu had never seen such a divine ability. A green light flashed in his hand and Bai disappeared. The Qingxian sword was in his hand. Li Mu raised his sword and slashed at the branches. This time, the branches attacking him were easily chopped off like tofu. Soon, only the bare trunk of the poplar tree was left. In the next moment, Li Mu suddenly felt his legs tighten. He looked down and realized that his legs were entangled by two vines that extended from the ground. He waved the Qingxian sword and two green lights flashed. Two thick vines were cut off by the Qingxian sword. Li Mu held the Qingxian sword in his hand and looked around. He realized that in a short period of time, he was surrounded by the shadows of trees. The trees in the forest surrounded him in layers. They were constantly changing their positions, implying some kind of formation. If they were allowed to form a formation, it would be very difficult for him to break the formation. Moreover, the person behind the scenes had not shown himself yet. Li Mu did not think too much. He took out a fulu and threw it into the air. Rumble! In the sky, the sound of thunder was loud. A huge purple thunder net came down from the sky. When the trees around Li Mu came into contact with the purple lightning net, they immediately turned into black ashes. Only a thick willow tree remained standing in its original place. A human face appeared on the willow tree. It was the face of an old man. He was staring at Li Mu with a horrified look. Green liquid flowed out from the corner of his mouth. This cultivator in the magical state, the strength of his Dharma treasure, the strength of his fulu, and the strangeness of his supernatural powers were completely beyond his imagination. He, who was seriously injured, wanted to take the opportunity to sneak attack this human cultivator and devour his essence, blood, and soul to recover from his injuries. He did not expect to be at a disadvantage in such a short period of time. Not only did his injuries not recover, they even worsened. Everything in this trip to the North region was beyond his expectations. First, he found out that the soul of the woman that the prince consort asked him to find was still there. Moreover, she had already become a fifth realm ghost cultivator. Even though she had just entered the fifth realm, he suffered a lot. In the end, just as he was about to use his powerful spiritual power to heavily injure the female ghost and kill her, something happened. Their battle destroyed a cliff, and the collapsed cliff caused the river to stop flowing. After that, a female corpse flew out of the pool. That female corpse looked exactly the same as the female ghost. Although she was only at the peak of the fourth realm, she was only one step away from the fifth realm. After the female corpse appeared, she first attacked the female ghost. He wanted to sit back and enjoy the fruits of her labor. He did not expect that the two would team up to deal with him. Although he was strong, he could not take on the combined forces of the corpse and ghost. After heavily injuring them, they escaped. He could not chase after them, so he could only stay here and recover. Today, he finally saw a human cultivator and wanted to devour him to recover. He did not expect this person's strength to be beyond his imagination. Instead, it brought him trouble. Fifth Realm Tree Demon. Li Mu's face was gloomy. He looked at the face on the willow tree and said, "Chui Ming sent you. Where is Su He?" This person pointed out Prince Consort Chui. The old man's expression changed and he immediately understood. Prince Consort Chui's guess was right. Someone wanted to use the female ghost to cause trouble. Since that was the case, he could not let him go so easily. The willow tree changed and turned into a skinny old man. His feet were rooted to the ground. Branches and vines quickly drilled out of the ground and surrounded the forest Li Mu was in. Countless branches and vines shot toward Li Mu from all directions. Although Li Mu had a treasured armor to protect him, it mainly defended against spells. Even the treasured armor could not completely protect him from physical attacks that had no blind spots. Li Mu formed a seal with one hand and silently chanted a spell. The Qingxian sword turned into thousands of sword shadows and surrounded his body. They scattered in all directions. Wherever the sword light passed, the vines and branches were all destroyed. Puff! The old man's body trembled and he grunted. He spat out green liquid again. Li Mu looked at him and asked coldly, "Speak, where is Su He?" The old man's aura withered again and his face was filled with shock. After the short battle just now, he was almost certain that even if he was at his peak, he might not be a match for this Abhijna cultivator. Moreover, he had only recovered less than 30% of his strength. If he continued to fight, he might really die here. He did not continue to fight and quickly fled into the depths of the forest. Su He's whereabouts were unknown. Li Mu naturally would not let this tree demon go. He stuck a spirit travel talisman on himself and chased into the depths of the forest. The injured tree demon was frantically fleeing. Compared to the prince consort's safety, he cared more about his own life. In the 100 years of cultivation, he had experienced many dangers. However, after entering the 5th realm, he had never been chased by a 4th realm cultivator. He had also never seen such a powerful 4th realm cultivator. Fortunately, this was his home ground. It was not difficult to shake off the cultivator behind him. As he fled, he turned back to take a look. This glance made his soul leave his body. He saw that the human cultivator's speed was even faster than his. In the process of chasing, the human cultivator was constantly closing the distance between them. He would probably catch up to him soon. The tree demon was shocked. He did not dare to be careless and released his Abhijna with all his might. Wherever he passed, trees grew rapidly. The branches overlapped and completely sealed off his escape route. Li Mu's pursuit was blocked. He simply flew into the air above the forest. Looking down from above, the lush forest seemed to have become a whole. Suddenly, it became quiet. There were no longer any strange movements in the forest. The tree demon had clearly concealed his aura and completely blended into the forest. No matter how Li Mu used his heavenly eye or opened his eyes, he could not discover him. 5th realm demons could conceal their demonic aura. The demon-seeking talisman would not be of much use. He could be sure that the tree demon was still in the forest. However, he did not know where exactly he was. Li Mu's body descended slowly. He began to search the forest carefully. The forest was extremely quiet. It was so quiet that he could only hear his own footsteps. After a long time, his search was fruitless. Li Mu looked around. After confirming that there was no danger, he turned his back to a huge tree and rested for a short while. A human face gradually appeared on the tree behind him. A withered claw reached out silently from the tree trunk. Then, with lightning speed, it grabbed towards Li Mu's back. There was no time to react at such a short distance. The withered claw immediately made contact with Li Mu's body. However, it did not pierce through Li Mu's body as the tree demon had expected. It grabbed his heart and crushed it viciously. The claw was extremely fast. The moment it made contact with Li Mu's body, it seemed to have collided with an iron wall. With a crack, it directly snapped. Li Mu quickly turned around. He grabbed the wrist of the withered claw and stuck a fulu on it. He said indifferently, "Freeze." The withered claw remained in its extended position. The human face on the huge tree also became stunned. Chapter 286. Taking advantage of the moment when the tree demon was immobilized by the body-securing talisman, Li Mu stretched out his hand. A chain appeared in his hand and he tied it to the tree. After the tree in front of him was bound by the chain, it gradually transformed into a skinny old man with a chain around his neck. This was a torture tool specially made by the imperial court. It was used to capture demons and spirits, and it was always successful. The cultivation of the demons and spirits that were locked up would also be sealed. This 5th realm tree demon was now just an ordinary old man. Fortunately, he was heavily injured and probably had not even recovered 30% of his strength. Otherwise, even though Li Mu was not afraid of him in a head-on battle, it was almost impossible to capture him alive. Li Mu took away the body-securing talisman and the old man gradually regained his consciousness. Feeling the cold chain around his neck and the sealed mana in his body, his expression changed drastically. He wanted to escape but was gently pulled back by Li Mu. Li Mu looked at the old man and asked the question he was most concerned about. "Where did Su He go?" The old man glanced at Li Mu but did not speak. Li Mu took out a fulu and waved it in front of the old man. He asked, Do you know what this is? The old man looked at the purple heaven thunder talisman in his hand and could not help but swallow his saliva. Li Mu asked, "Guess. How many bolts of lightning can you withstand now?" The old man lowered his head and his face was extremely pale. Li Mu kept the purple heaven thunder talisman and took out a few more. He said, "Other than the purple heaven thunder talisman, I have a few more good things here. This is a sword talisman. It will destroy your demon body with one strike and your demon soul with the second strike. This sword is a heaven-grade divine weapon. It will not be a waste for you to die under this sword." The old man trembled and hurriedly said, "They escaped. The female ghost and the female corpse escaped." Li Mu was able to sense the emotions of this tree demon, so the possibility of him lying was not high. This made Li Mu feel a little relieved. If something really happened to Su He in the hands of this old demon, then even if he chopped him into pieces and burned him as firewood, it would still not be enough to appease the hatred in his heart. Li Mu's face was calm as he looked at the old man and said, "Speak. What happened at the Bay of Clear Water? If there is even half a lie, don't blame me for chopping you into pieces and burning you for firewood." The tree demon's life was in the hands of others, so he didn't dare to hide anything. He recounted everything that had happened in the Bay of Clear Water. He had been ordered by Cui Ming to come to North County to look for Madame Chu and Su He. He had searched the entire Yangqiu County with his ghost-seeking technique, but he couldn't find Madame Chu. Instead, he found Su He, who had just come out of seclusion. One demon and one ghost, a great battle broke out at that time. He had been in the 5th level for a long time, and Su He's cultivation was not as profound as his. However, their battle later on shattered the cliff, causing the Bay of Clear Water to stop flowing, releasing the female corpse from the bottom of the water. At first, the female corpse attacked Su He, but soon, the two came to an agreement and began to attack the tree demon. The tree demon was fighting 1 against 2, so he wasn't strong enough. He used a secret technique to heavily injure them, forcing Su He and the female corpse to retreat. However, he was also heavily injured and could only recuperate in the Bay of Clear Water. Until he met Li Mu. Li Mu looked at him coldly and asked, "Did Cui Ming send you?" The old man lowered his head, neither admitting nor denying. Li Mu fixed him in place again and sent him into the flask space. The flask space was a small space created by experts above the level of transcendence. It was attached to the real world and could be used to store things and hide people. In ancient times, some almighty experts would even create a spacious space for themselves to live in. Li Mu's ring had a very small space, equivalent to a small house, but it was enough to store the tree demon. The most important thing now was to find Su He. Although the tree demon was here and Su He was no longer needed to provide a witness, she was injured by the tree demon and the female corpse was spying on her. Li Mu was still worried about her safety. However, the north region was so big and there were no clues. Where should he go to find her? After thinking for a while, he decided to go to the county office and ask. If there was no news from the county office, then he would go to the county office. With a heavy heart, Li Mu walked out of the Bay of Clear Water. At a certain moment, he sensed something and looked to the side. In the next moment, he flew into a dense forest on the left. "Save me!" In the forest, a girl was carrying a bamboo basket with some freshly picked mushrooms. At this moment, the girl was being forced into a corner by several gray wolves. Her face was filled with panic. A gray wolf grinned, revealing its white teeth, and pounced at the girl. The bamboo basket in the girl's hand fell. She curled up into a ball and closed her eyes in despair. However, after waiting for a long time, nothing terrible happened to her. She carefully opened her eyes and saw a figure standing in front of her. The gray wolves were lying motionless on the ground. They were clearly dead. Seeing this scene, the girl was stunned for a moment. She quickly got up from the ground and said, "Thank you for saving my life, young master. It was just a few wild wolves. Li Mu could kill them with a wave of his hand." He bent down and helped the girl pick up the mushrooms on the ground. He put them into the basket and handed it back to her. "Are you okay?" The girl shook her head and said, "I'm fine. She took a step forward and was about to take the basket when her foot suddenly twisted and she almost fell. Li Mu quickly reached out to support her. When he approached the girl, he smelled a faint fragrance on her body. He could not help but sniff a few more times. The girl noticed Li Mu's actions and blushed. Li Mu coughed and asked, "Are you injured?" The girl looked down and a trace of pain appeared on her face. "I think I twisted my ankle." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "I'm a cultivator. If you don't mind, I can treat you." The girl said, "My life was saved by young master. How would I dare to mind? I'll leave my injury to young master. I'm sorry for offending you." Li Mu bent down. His hand glowed with golden light as he gently held the girl's slender ankle. A strange numbness came from her ankle, causing her to blush even more. Soon, Li Mu withdrew his hand, stood up and said, "Miss, you can try again." The girl nodded and tried to walk a few steps. She said in surprise, "It doesn't hurt anymore. Young master, you're amazing." Li Mu smiled and said, "This mountain is not safe. Where is your home? I'll send you back." The girl said, "My home is in the village at the foot of the mountain. I'll have to trouble young master." Li Mu smiled again and said, "It's no trouble. Let's go." The girl carried the basket and walked side by side with Li Mu. She curiously asked, "Young master, are you a cultivator? I heard that our northern county has a Fulu school. The cultivators there are all very powerful. Are you a disciple of the Fulu school?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I'm only a mountain cultivator. I don't have the qualifications to be a disciple of the Fulu school." The girl smiled and said, "Young master, you're too humble. You're so skilled to be able to kill those hungry wolves so easily and heal my injuries. Young master, you must not be an ordinary cultivator." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Just a few hungry wolves. If young master is willing, you can easily get rid of them." The girl was stunned and shook her head. "Young master, you're joking. I don't even have the strength to truss up a chicken. If I'm not as powerful as young master, how can I deal with those hungry wolves?" Li Mu looked at her and smiled. "What's so powerful about dealing with a few hungry wolves? I can't compare to young master who can steal the sky and fake the sun." The girl looked at Li Mu and was slightly stunned. She said in shock, "Young master, what are you talking about?" Li Mu said coldly, "You vixen, how long are you going to pretend for?" The woman stared straight at Li Mu. The panic on her face gradually calmed down, but she still asked with some surprise, "How did you see through it? With your cultivation, it's impossible for you to see through my true form." Li Mu said, "Do I need to see? I can smell your scent from far away." The girl's expression changed. She asked in embarrassment and anger, "What scent do I have?" Li Mu said, "Fragrance." The girl's fragrance was one that Li Mu had never smelled before. It was not the fragrance of flowers or herbs. It was a unique body fragrance. When he was in the divine capital, Li Mu smelled this body fragrance every night when he fell asleep. How could he not know that she was from the heavenly fox clan like Xiaobai? Even though there was a huge difference in the fragrance coming from the two of them, Li Mu was certain that there was no mistaking it. The girl's expression softened. She looked around and said, "I don't believe that you can guess that there's something wrong with me just by the fragrance." Li Mu pointed at the colorful mushrooms in her bamboo basket and said, "If you want to pretend to be a little girl picking mushrooms, please be more professional. Who would go to the mountains to pick poisonous mushrooms?" Chapter 287. After being exposed by Li Mu, that woman simply did not continue acting anymore. She threw away the bamboo basket, curled her lips and said, "What kind of lousy forest is this? Even the mushrooms here are poisonous." Li Mu's expression had completely darkened. He kept a distance from the fox demon and asked sternly, "How dare you, demon? You pretended to be a human woman and lured me here. What do you want?" Li Mu could not see through the fox demon's cultivation. The demon aura emitted from her body was very strong. She was at least in the five-tailed realm. Seducing men and absorbing yang qi were common tricks used by the three-tailed fox spirit. The five-tailed fox spirit was already comparable to a human fifth realm cultivator. The effects of human yang qi, blood, and soul on their cultivation were negligible. The woman smiled seductively and said, "Someone asked me to kill you. Look at your handsome face and soft skin. I can't bear to do it. How about this? If you join the Maisong sect, I won't kill you. I can also report back." Hearing the name Maisong sect, Li Mu's expression changed slightly. Like the corpse sect of the Thousand Illusions Venerable and the soul sect of the Nether Ghost Saint, the Maisong sect was also one of the 10 sects of the demonic path. It was said that the people of the Maisong sect were all handsome men and beautiful women. They were all good at seduction. It was an important organization used by the demonic path to collect and inquire about information. Li Mu's enemies were all in Fairy's capital. Who in Fairy's capital was colluding with the demonic path to be able to hire the assassins of the Maisong sect. Cui Ming, Zhou Ting, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, the minister of the Ministry of Revenue. Li Mu counted and found that he had offended too many people. There was no way to determine who was the mastermind unless he asked the fox in front of him. Then he looked at the woman in front of him and asked, "Who asked you to kill me?" The woman shook her head gently and said regretfully, "I can't tell you this unless you go back with me." Li Mu said, "Then let's see if you have the ability." The woman smiled charmingly and said, "Then I'll let you see my abilities." As she smiled, Li Mu's mind wavered. However, he had been tested by Xiao Bai for a long time and quickly regained his composure. After silently reciting the clear heart mantra, the fox demon's seduction technique was completely useless against him. Her charm failed, and the woman said in surprise, "No wonder you're so bold. You do have some skills." 2 short swords appeared in her hands. She smiled and said, "Since you're not willing, then I'll beat you until you're willing." As soon as she finished speaking, her figure disappeared before Li Mu's eyes. He immediately used the fighting word incantation and his body instinctively lifted his sword to block. He fought with the fox demon who wielded a short sword. However, the pain on her body was not worth mentioning compared to the humiliation in her heart. She stared fixedly at Li Mu. Her originally clear and bright eyes seemed to be filled with flames of fury. "There's no use looking at me like that." Li Mu said, "Tell me who ordered you. As long as you are obedient, you will suffer less physical pain." The woman took a deep breath. The anger in her eyes was gradually extinguished. She said calmly, "My name is Phantom Princess. Remember my name. I will return today's humiliation 100-fold." With that, she grabbed a piece of jade hanging from her waist and crushed it. In the next moment, her figure disappeared before Li Mu's eyes. The immortal binding lock lost its target and shrunk rapidly. Finally, it shrunk into a ball and fell to the ground. A spatial Dharma treasure. Li Mu was shocked to see the fox demon escape before his eyes. He did not expect the fox demon to have such a Dharma treasure. Just like the flask Dharma treasure, this spatial Dharma treasure had the ability to teleport. It could only be made by a 7th realm cultivator. It could teleport someone thousands of miles away. Li Mu searched the surroundings for a long time but could not find the fox demon's aura. In the end, he could only walk back. He picked up the 2 short swords that she did not have time to retrieve and put them into his ring. Then, he flew in the direction of the county. Chapter 288. Zhejiang County. 100,000 Mountains. In a hidden palace in the mountain, after a spatial ripple, Phantom Princess's figure appeared out of thin air. A few figures sitting cross-legged in the palace slowly opened their eyes. A stooped old man asked, "Who actually forced you to use a teleportation talisman?" Lord, Heavenly Lord also refined one of this talisman. "Could it be that you encountered a 6th realm cultivator? A despicable human cultivator." Phantom Princess's beautiful face was filled with anger. "How dare he do this to me? The next time I meet him, I'll make him wish he was dead." She did not say that the person who had forced her to use her life-saving trump card was just a minor cultivator in the transcendent realm. She had lost to a Realm 4 cultivator and even lost her weapon. This was an extremely embarrassing matter. Even now, she still didn't understand how a 4th realm cultivator with magical powers could have so many strange magical powers, magical weapons that were impossible to defend against, and high-level talismans that he didn't feel the slightest bit of heartache when he threw them away. She walked out of the palace and the people outside bowed. "Greetings, Lord Phantom Princess." Phantom Princess's face darkened. "Tell Chui Ming that the mission failed. Tell him to pray for himself." North County. When Li Mu walked into Yangqiu County, he still could not figure out who had asked the Devil's Doctrine to hunt him down from afar. Chui Ming and Zhou Ting were the most likely culprits. After all, he killed Zhou Ting's son and caused Chui Ming to lose his position. He also caused him to be searched. The purpose of returning to North County was to send him on his way as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the fox demon got away. If it wasn't her chest that was tied up but her hand, this wouldn't have happened. It was this indecent talisman that was to blame. But then again, that fox demon's teleportation talisman was really heaven-defying. As long as he crushed it when he was in danger, he could immediately escape. It was more effective than any offensive or defensive talisman. When he returned to the fairy's capital this time, he had to ask His Majesty indirectly if he could get one for himself. What made him helpless was that he already had a lot of enemies. Now, there was another level 5 fox demon. The heavenly fox race was very stubborn about revenge. For a gentleman, 10 years wasn't too late. For a fox, 100 years wasn't too long. Not only were they vengeful, but they were also very patient. In order to take revenge, they could suffer hardships that ordinary people could not. They could endure pain that ordinary people could not endure. Often, fox demons would go undercover by their enemy's side in order to take revenge. They would follow them for decades just to find an opportunity to take revenge. One could only be a thief for 1,000 days, but not a thief for 1,000 days. Constable Zhao said, 2 days ago, a thick fog rose from the mountainside of a mountain in Yu County. When the people entered the fog, they couldn't see their fingers in front of them. No matter how they walked, they would eventually come out of the fog. The initial suspicion was that a ghost was causing trouble, but the ghost didn't hurt anyone. The local government investigated, and the county government's cultivators couldn't enter the fog. Yu County just reported it, and the county government hasn't had time to deal with it yet. Li Mu couldn't let go of anything that could be related to Suhi. He thought for a moment and said, "Which mountain in Yu County? I'll go take a look." Chapter 289. North Region. Yu County. A nameless mountain. This mountain had no name since ancient times. The people in the villages at the foot of the mountain made a living by gathering firewood and hunting. 3 days ago, in one night, a thick fog suddenly appeared on the mountainside. The fog was a vast expanse of white. After walking into the fog, it was difficult to see anything. It was so dark that one couldn't even see their fingers if they stretched out their hand. Not too long after the commoners walked into the fog, they would walk out of it again. It was as if they were walking around in circles. The cultivators from the county yamen who entered the fog also met the same fate as the commoners. Clearly, there was a formation set up in the fog that prevented outsiders from entering. Typically speaking, such a situation would only occur when the mountain was occupied by an expert. It was fortunate that the expert in the fog only occupied the mountain and didn't harm the commoners. The officials of Yu County didn't dare to disturb the person in the fog, so they could only report the situation to the county yamen and wait for the county yamen to deal with it. This mountain concerned the livelihood of the commoners at the foot of the mountain. The several hundred commoners at the foot of the mountain were also concerned about the situation in the fog. For the past 3 days, the fog had remained calm. However, an hour ago, it suddenly began to fluctuate intensely. It was unknown what terrifying thing had happened inside, but it left the commoners feeling uneasy. Halfway up the mountain, within the fog, more than 10 black silhouettes were using all kinds of demonic arts and artifacts to attack a formation. There were 2 women in the formation. Even though they were dressed differently, their appearances and figures were identical, as if they were twin sisters. No matter how one looked at them, one wouldn't be able to tell the difference between them. The only difference between the 2 was their temperament. One of them had a pale face, but there was gentleness in her eyes. On the other hand, the other had a frosty expression on her face, and there wasn't the slightest hint of life in her. The gentle-looking woman seemed to be severely injured. Her body seemed to be in a state between illusory and corporeal, as if she would dissipate at any moment. The other white-robed woman had a frosty expression on her face, and her aura was weak as well. It was clear that she was severely injured. The dozen or so black figures were clearly ghosts, and they were using all kinds of methods to attack the formation. Under their attacks, the formation was on the verge of collapse, and it was not far from being broken. I didn't think that we would have such a harvest this time around. Even though we didn't manage to find out the cause of Prince Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's death, we managed to find a severely injured spirit. They have no reason to kill us. The jailer outside sneered and said, "What reason does the county magistrate need to kill you 2 little ghosts? The county magistrate has just arrived and hasn't made any achievements. Killing you 2 evil ghosts is just the right thing to do." The small ghost defended herself. "We didn't harm anyone." The jailer curled his lips. "Who cares?" The small ghost panicked. "It's over, it's over. We're really going to die again. Sister Sue, come and save us." The big ghost looked worried. "I don't know how Sister Sue is. That tree demon is too powerful. I hope she'll be fine." The county government prison's door was opened. Constable Zhou and Li Mu came out. Li Mu saw the 2 female ghosts, one big and one small, locked up in the prison. He shook his head and helplessly said to Constable Zhou, "I know them. Although they are ghosts, they have never done anything harmful. Can you let them go?" "This?" Constable Zhou looked embarrassed. Finally, he nodded and said, "I'll ask the county magistrate." Li Mu smiled and said, "I'll have to trouble Constable Zhou." Constable Zhou nodded and turned to leave. Li Mu walked toward the 2 female ghosts. When they saw Li Mu, they were stunned for a moment. Then they looked surprised. The small ghost grabbed the prison's bars and said excitedly, "Young master, are you here to save us?" The big ghost said worriedly, "Young master, Sister Sue is in danger. There's a tree demon." Li Mu smiled and said, "Don't worry. I've already seen her. She'll be fine." In the prison, the 2 female ghosts were finally relieved. In the county government's courtyard, Constable Zhou was in a dilemma. After Magistrate Zhang left, the new county magistrate of Yangqiu arrived a few days ago. This magistrate came from Luoyang. When he came to the county government, he brought a few confidants with him. As an old arrestor, he was left out. Recently, there was a tendency for him to be replaced. He really couldn't say anything in front of this county magistrate. However, Li Mu was his friend, so he couldn't refuse Li Mu. He hesitated for a while, but still walked to the back of the court. He knocked on the door of the back hall and stood outside. He said, "Sir, I have something important to report." After a long time, a faint voice came from the hall. "Come in." Constable Zhou walked in. An official sitting on a chair asked, "What's the important thing?" Constable Zhou immediately said, "Sir, the 2 female ghosts caught by the county government today didn't harm anyone. Is it better to let them go?" The official looked up at him and asked, "Constable Zhou, are you instructing me?" Constable Zhou immediately said, "I don't dare." The official snorted coldly and said, "Those 2 female ghosts didn't harm anyone today. Can you guarantee that they didn't harm anyone in the past and won't harm anyone in the future?" he said guiltily. Sir Li, it's all my fault for not being strict enough and arresting your friends. Please, Sir Li, don't blame me. After that, the Zhou family didn't even fart. If such a person held a grudge against him, he didn't even dare to think about the possibility. After a while, Yangqiu County Magistrate Yang Qiu took a deep breath and patted Constable Zhou's shoulder, saying, "Do a good job. I have faith in you." After walking out of the county government, Li Mu turned to look at the two female ghosts and said, "Sister Su is still in a deep sleep. It should take some time for her to wake up. You two, do you want to find a cave to cultivate or follow me and wait for her to wake up?" The two girls said almost at the same time without hesitation, "Follow you." They had already experienced the fate of two lonely souls drifting about in the outside world. They were either devoured and enslaved by stronger ghosts or captured by the government. The days in Clearwater Bay were the most comfortable and peaceful days in their two lives. Following Sister Su, not only did they not have to worry about being bullied, but they could also receive guidance in cultivation. This was something that the two lonely ghosts could not even dream of. The two female ghosts made a decision. Li Mu threw them a few pieces of spiritual jade and let them cultivate in the flask heaven space. They also took care of the tree demon. Only then did he return home. Tonight was the last night he would spend with Lu Hanyan. In the next 2 months, he had to prepare for the imperial examination. The imperial examination policy was originally set by him, so he knew better than anyone how to take the examination. After the imperial examination, he would be busy for some time. In this way, the next time he returned to Beijing would be at least 3 or even 4 months later. This meant that he could accompany them for a period of time like this. If it was just meeting and dual cultivating for a night, he could come back at any time as long as he asked for leave from the Empress. However, Lu Hanyan also had to go into seclusion for a period of time when she returned to Mount Baiyun this time. She had to master some of the divine powers and spells that she had just learned. The possibility of the two of them meeting often was not high. The next morning, after sending her and Wan Wan back to the mountain, Li Mu and Xiao Bai did not delay. They used high-level divine travel talismans to rush back to the fairy's capital at the fastest speed. They did not rest along the way and finally made it back in the early morning of the third day. Ziwei Palace. The morning assembly had just begun. After Li Mu was summoned into the palace, he cupped his fists and said, "Your Majesty, I was ordered by Your Majesty to go to Beijing to investigate the incident 20 years ago, when Princess Yunyang's son-in-law, Chui Ming, killed a woman from Yangqiu County. He was ambushed by a fifth realm demon. It wasn't difficult to calculate his location through the things he left behind. After returning home, Li Mu released the two female ghosts. Suhi was still asleep and he didn't know when she would wake up. He let them accompany Xiao Bai at home and do chores like cleaning the house. Raising two obedient ghosts at home was much easier than hiring maids and servants. Li Mu didn't stay at home for long. He walked out of the door and headed to the Ministry of Justice. When he left the palace, he received a message from the Empress telling him to go to the Ministry of Justice and investigate the case of the Zhejiang County chief. It had been confirmed that Chui Ming was a spy from the demon sect. From the tree demon's memories, he also learned that the tragedy in Zhejiang County was framed by Chui Ming and the demon sect. The so-called investigation was just to urge the Ministry of Justice to reverse the verdict for the Zhejiang County chief. On the way to the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu's heart was heavy. Even if he reversed the verdict for the Zhejiang County chief, it would be useless. The Zhejiang County chief's entire family and more than 100 lives had been lost more than a decade ago. Even if the imperial court cleared their names today, they wouldn't be able to see it. Princess Yunyang's son-in-law was a member of the demon sect. This time, the entire Shao clan and its old clique would probably be in a panic. Most of the people in the divine capital were shocked that Cui Ming was a spy from the demon sect and gossiped about the Shao royal family's scandal. However, very few people talked about the Zhejiang County chief and his family who had died unjustly. Li Mu arrived at the Ministry of Justice and explained his intentions to the Ministry of Justice's director. The imperial court had already concluded that the Zhejiang County chief and his family had died unjustly. Li Mu was also acting under the empress's orders, so the Ministry of Justice naturally didn't dare to be negligent. They mobilized all the officials to search for the case files of the Zhejiang County chief from more than a decade ago. These files would be overturned and rewritten. The Zhejiang County chief's injustice would also be cleared, although this had nothing to do with him anymore, because colluding with the demon sect was a crime that could implicate 9 generations of his family. His family and descendants had also died in the incident more than a decade ago. The director of the Ministry of Justice destroyed the old fake files one by one inside. After more than a decade, the Zhejiang County chief has finally received justice. Zhou Zhong placed his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "Justice that comes late isn't justice. From the day he died, he would never receive justice." After saying this, he didn't speak again. The director of the Ministry of Justice thought about his words. His voice wasn't loud, but it brought endless vitality to this deathly silent world. Zhou Yi cleared her throat and made her voice dignified. She asked, "What is it?" Li Mu did not expect the empress to still be awake. He slowly said, "I think that the imperial court should announce the injustice the Zhejiang prefectural governor suffered to the world. This is the only way to clear his name." Zhou Yi thought for a moment and said, "Tomorrow, I will issue an edict and order the Ministry of Works to erect a monument and a temple in Zhejiang prefectural governor's memory for future generations." The empress thought more than he thought. Li Mu sighed. "Your Majesty is wise." Zhou Yi asked, "Is there anything else?" Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Your Majesty, do you have many conches that can transmit messages?" "Your Majesty, my fiancé is in the northern prefectural, thousands of miles away from me. It is inconvenient for us to meet. I want to give her one." Chapter 292. After obtaining this magical conch, Li Mu suddenly had an idea. If he could give one to Lu Hanyan, then even if the two of them were thousands of miles apart, one in Beijing and the other in Chengdu, they would still be able to talk to each other in real time. Making conch porridge every night was something that he could look forward to. Instead of calling this conch a magical item, it was more like a phone that could only talk to one person. In Changle Palace, Zhou Yi said calmly, "No." Li Mu was a little disappointed, but he was prepared. After all, if he had 3 of these things, wouldn't the empress be eavesdropping on him and Lu Hanyan when they were being sweet? This would be too much of a shock to her. After all, she was almost 30 years old and was still single. It was inevitable that she would be envious when she saw other couples. He couldn't let her see other people in love. Should he ask for her conch and give it to Lu Hanyan? This bold idea only flashed through Li Mu's mind for a moment before he extinguished it. With the empress's breadth of mind, she wouldn't give Li Mu a conch. She would only give him a whip. "I'm sorry for being presumptuous. Good night, Your Majesty. I'll hang up first." Announcing to the world that the Zhejiang prefectural governor was innocent had already been reported to the empress. Li Mu was about to put down the conch when the empress's voice came again. "Tell me about you and your fiancé." Li Mu was stunned. He didn't expect the empress to be so nosy. It wasn't a big deal to talk about his experience with Lu Hanyan, but it seemed a little cruel to tell an old single dog about it. This was no longer abusing a single dog, but killing a dog. However, this was the empress's own request, and she didn't give Li Mu a choice. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "That was almost a year ago. At that time, I was still a constable in Yangqiu County. She had just moved to Yangqiu County and lived next door to me." As Li Mu narrated the story to the empress, he also recalled the process of how he and Lu Hanyan met, got to know each other, and fell in love with each other. In his 2 lifetimes, he had only been in a serious relationship. From the beginning, the two of them were hostile to each other. Later on, they were inseparable. Who knew how many twists and turns they had gone through in the process? Li Mu added, "In less than a year, she will come to the capital and we will get married there. If you have time at that time, you can come to my home for the wedding banquet. My wife admires you a lot and won't let me say anything bad about you?" The Empress asked calmly. "Did you speak ill of me?" Li Mu hurriedly explained. "What I mean is that she is very protective of your majesty, just like how I am protective of your majesty." The Empress was silent for a moment and asked, Why are you protecting me?" Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Because in my heart, your majesty is a wise ruler worthy of my protection. The reason why I am fearless in the capital is because I know that your majesty is behind me. Your majesty is my strongest support. I am willing to be the sharp spear in your majesty's hand." The Empress didn't speak. After a long time, she said, "How is your learning of magic?" Li Mu said honestly, "During this time, I have been busy with Chui Ming. Under your majesty's guidance, I only learned how to be invisible." The Empress said, "Although you have Fulu and magic treasures, these are all external objects. You need to learn more magic as soon as possible to improve your strength." Li Mu also understood what the Empress said. Cultivators could rely on Fulu and magic treasures, but relying on oneself was better than relying on anything else. With the water-repellent talisman, one could also move in water. However, if one learned the magic to enter water, one could go to any river, lake, or sea. The fire-sitting technique could allow one to enter fire without burning, and there was no need to use Fulu magic treasures. Other than that, there were other magic that were very practical. For example, the clothing blocking technique could prevent fire, rain, and dust from touching one's body. The Qi restriction technique could push one's physical body to the extreme, comparable to the golden body of Buddhism. There was no sound from the conch, but Li Mu felt sleepy and quickly fell asleep. In the dream, the Empress wore an ordinary white dress and said, "From today onwards, I will teach you magic in your dream. Learn seriously." Sure enough, flattery was useful. Having a transcendent tier elite teach them step by step was an opportunity that many people could only dream of. As long as Li Mu stood firmly on the Empress's side, he would be able to see creation tier elites waving at him. No matter how high one's cultivation talent was, it was very difficult to reach the creation realm before the age of 30 without a great opportunity. However, with the guidance of a transcendent realm master, enough spiritual jades, and enough psychokinesis, it was not impossible to complete the path that others would take decades to complete in a few years. Shangguan Li was an example. Speaking of Shangguan Li, she was the Empress's personal maid and also the Empress's mouthpiece in the imperial court. This time, she did not appear in the morning court. Chui Ming escaped from under the eyes of the inner guards, which made her very angry because the people who were watching Chui Ming were her subordinates. In order to save face, she specially asked the Empress to personally lead people to hunt down Chui Ming. The task of passing the imperial court's decree fell on Li Mu's head. Li Mu walked from the corner to the high platform in front of the Empress and replaced Shangguan Li's position. The demon sect's hands had already reached into the imperial court. More than 10 years ago, they had planted spies in the imperial court and even became the emperor's son-in-law. If Chui Ming's old crimes had not been exposed, no one knew how long he would have hidden and how many state secrets he had leaked to the demon sect. No one knew if there were other spies of the demon sect in the imperial court other than Chui Ming. The internal guards were already investigating the officials in the imperial court. After the court, Zhang Chun and Li Mu walked side by side and asked, "If you can't search the official souls, how can you investigate the spies of the demon sect?" Li Mu said, "The spies of the demon sect all have one thing in common. No matter if they are male or female, they are all very handsome. Such people are the easiest to gain the trust of others and obtain information." Zhang Chun breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Then they shouldn't suspect me?" After saying that, he seemed to have realized something. His expression became a little complicated. For a moment, he didn't know whether to be happy or sad. If the Empress had not given him enlightenment when he was at a bottleneck, Li Mu would probably still be stuck at the concentrating spirit realm. Not only did she help Li Mu break through to the next level, but in the past few nights, she had also used the dream entry technique to teach Li Mu divine abilities in his dreams. Under her guidance, Li Mu made rapid progress. In just 3 days, he had mastered 2 divine abilities. Other than that, Li Mu would also play chess with her in his dreams and chat with her. Of course, most of the time, he was asking the Empress questions about his cultivation. After watching Madame Chu leave, Li Mu returned home and cooked dinner. After hesitating for a while, he took out the conch and activated it with his spiritual power. "Your Majesty, have you eaten?" There was no response from the conch for a long time. Just as Li Mu was about to put it away, the space in the courtyard rippled and the Empress appeared out of thin air. Li Mu was very envious of her ability to transform into a living person. However, the teleportation technique required one to be at the peak of Dongxian. He still had a long way to go. When he was in the north region, he used the nature pill to save Suhi. Li Mu planned to care more for the Empress when he returned to the divine capital. She was actually just an ordinary woman trapped in a cage. This had nothing to do with her identity as an empress, nor did it have anything to do with her transcendent strength. What she needed the most was not power or strength, but family and friends. Li Mu could not be her family. He could only try his best to be her friend. Moreover, with the healing element Xiao Bai around, she should be able to experience some feelings that the Empress could not in the palace. After the meal, the Empress gave Xiao Bai some pointers on her cultivation. Before she left, she suddenly looked at Xiao Bai and asked, "Do you want to go to the palace with me to play?" Xiao Bai was a little tempted. However, she first looked at Li Mu. Li Mu nodded and said, "If you want to go, you can go with Sister Zhou." As a single dog, she did not sleep in the middle of the night and made conch porridge with Li Mu just to listen to his love story with Lu Hanyan. It was enough to see how lonely the Empress was. Xiao Bai was naturally adorable. If she stayed by the Empress's side, she could relieve some of her loneliness. Different from Shangguan Li and Mr. Mei, in Xiao Bai's heart, there was no Empress of the Great Zhou. There was only Sister Zhou who treated her very well and gave her the essence of the celestial fox. The Empress did not lack people who respected her. What she lacked were people who were not afraid of her identity as the Empress and treated her as an equal. Since ancient times, it had been lonely at the top. Whether it was the peak of strength or the peak of status, once one climbed to the top, it was easy to become lonely. Xiao Bai had been longing for the beautiful scenery of the Imperial Garden for a long time. After seeing Li Mu agree, she happily held the Empress's hand and said, "Okay, okay." The 2 figures disappeared in front of Li Mu again. Li Mu walked to the courtyard and began to practice his new supernatural power. After a while, in the Imperial Garden, Zhou looked at Xiao Bai and asked, "Xiao Bai, how did you meet Li Mu?" Speaking of this, a brilliant smile appeared on Xiao Bai's face as she said, "Before I could transform, I accidentally fell into a hunter's trap. It was Benefactor who saved me and even bandaged my wounds. From then on, I swore to repay Benefactor." Zhou asked curiously, "How?" Xiao Bai blushed slightly and said, "I want to marry Benefactor and stay by his side for the rest of my life." Zhou was slightly stunned and asked, "Doesn't he already have a fiancée?" Xiao Bai said, "Benefactor has Sister Lu and Sister Wanwan, but he can also have me. The 3 of us will accompany Benefactor for the rest of our lives." Zhou Qiong had already forgotten a certain matter, but Xiao Bai's words caused her to involuntarily recall the absurd scene she had seen in Li Mumu's dream that night. This caused her, who had never experienced something like this before, to feel an indescribable panic in her heart. She even felt a deep sense of fear. Then, she was suddenly shocked. On the path of cultivation, this was not the first time she had felt this. This was an inner demon. As her cultivation increased, the inner demon would also become stronger. Once an inner demon was born, the consequences would be unimaginable. She wanted to suppress this palpitating heart, but the more she tried not to think about it, the clearer the image in her mind became. With great difficulty, She finally suppressed this palpitating heart with supreme determination. In her heart, she was already extremely regretful. She had transformed into the woman in his dream and played with him in every possible way, causing Li Mu to mistakenly think that an inner demon had appeared. Now, she had finally received her retribution. Moreover, she could not blame Li Mu for this at all. Because she had invaded Li Mu's dream without his consent, she could only blame herself. Xiao Bai was playing in the imperial garden, while Zhou returned to her bedroom and sat cross-legged on the bed. The matter of an inner demon could not be underestimated. If it was ignored, the cultivation would stagnate at best, and the cultivation would regress at worst or even suffer from qi deviation. Her inner demon had arisen because of Li Mu. The simplest and fastest way was naturally to kill Li Mu, and the inner demon would naturally be eliminated. But she could not and would not do so. How could she bear to kill the most understanding and supportive of her? For her sake, he did not hesitate to offend all the court officials, the old and new parties, and her most capable and closest subjects in the 3 academies. Zhou took a deep breath, slowly closed her eyes, and began to think of other ways to eliminate the inner demon. You're tuning in to the Legend of the Vagabond YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.